that. And I know, whoops, the lady comes right out of the clouds with that one. All right, so we're being recorded. Okay, great. Well, we have a full agenda. I've gone down the agenda and we have 2 action items. We've got 7 items on the consent calendar and 13 informational items. As I mentioned before, this is sort of par for the course right now as we progress through some really important stages of the project. We're going to have pretty substantive discussions, and we'll go ahead and commence the meeting. And I'll call the meeting to order officially and would ask that public comment on any items that are not listed on the agenda be shared now. Okay, not hearing any, we're going to go ahead and jump right into our action items calendar for the board members.
Very good. Let's go on to our next slide. So the first one is to continue to work with all of our public-facing committees, JPA Board, PSC, and the WCDS Subcommittee under the Governor's emergency orders and continue to move forward like that. Jeff Mitchell, our General Counsel, I know he's on. Jeff, do you have any updates for the board?
No, no updates at this point.
Okay, so this is still available for the board members to consider to continue to work under the emergency orders as we go forward. So Michael, this is open for board questions or consideration.
Any questions from our board members, state partners on this particular item? Okay, hearing none, any public comment on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve this.
Marla, second here in the room. And I'll go through. Rachel, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Becky?
Yes.
Chris? Thank you. Deborah Martinez?
Yes.
Very good. Gilbert, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Melissa Livingston?
Yes.
Very good. Deborah Bates?
Yes.
Good. Roxana?
Yes.
Very good. And Rogelio?
Yes,
Rogelio?
yes.
Very good. Thank you. And if you couldn't hear in the room, all board members did approve that action. Okay. Michael, the next one that's up, if the folks that were on the board last year around this time remember, we have a contract with the California Department of Technology that we purchase our AWS services through. The board authorized me and gave me delegated authority to be able to spend within a certain dollar amount that was in alignment with the budget on AWS. Sort of like paying the water bill these days because they do all of our hosting. Last year and through the current fiscal year, the board approved delegated authority to me to spend up to $16.8 million. As we go into next fiscal year, and with adding the Cal-Win counties and the amount of environments that we have and going through all of those activities, our spend is going to dramatically increase. We've already accommodated that in the budget. It's already approved through our state budget and federal budget, but I need to come back to the board and request an increase to be able to be commensurate with the budget, and that amount is $26.5 million will be our spend in AWS. So that's what I'm coming back to do, to say that's project our spend to be. It's already accommodated in our budget, and seeking that increase from what was last fiscal year, 16.8, to what is next fiscal year, 26.5 million. So Michael, that's up for a board discussion or consideration.
So John, each year we'll basically, if I remember what we agreed to, we would earmark this amount at the budgeted amount and then readdress and approve it each year. So that's what this is?
Yeah, if I remember last fiscal year as we discussed this, is we were projecting that $16.8 million and the contract. And I think this was a newer contract. We were moving things there. And the board said, okay, we'll approve you within that, but I want you to come back if you are going over the projected budget, and let's have a discussion about what is over budget, why it's over budget, and what we're doing to sort of mitigate those items. So that hasn't happened this fiscal year. We've stayed within, but we do have projected that our budget will increase to keep up with work activities next fiscal year, and that's a 26.5. So raising that delegated authority to that, that is equivalent to the budget.
Okay,
and
so
the team's working really hard to be able to manage our account appropriately, shutting down accounts so we don't have that aren't being used at night and those types of things. So the team has put a lot of work into doing that, and we'll continue to tune the accounts and how we manage those.
So John, was it anticipated that we would need to increase it?
This next fiscal year, not right now. We think that we're going to be able to stay within that 26.5. But I'll tell you, one of the things that we look at is I don't want to use the lack of availability of a environment to hold back something that we need to do. So if we need to spin up an environment, we spin up the environment and then try to make the necessary adjustments. So right now, I believe that we will stay within that 26.5. But if we have a need, we first of all look to be able to meet that need in the budget. And if we creep up on that, it'll come back to the board, and we'll have a discussion on why we're creeping up on that amount prior to the close of the fiscal year next year.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification on that. Was someone going to ask a question?
I was going to ask a question. I was just wondering what was the actual for the year? Where are we at?
I think we're pretty.
14.9.
14.9 million is where we're at right now this fiscal year.
Against the 16 original?
Yeah, against
Yeah,
the
so-
16.8.
Okay, so we're trending right to it. Okay, and yeah, give me this is since we have people at the Galleria, I can't see them individually on here. So John, if you can acknowledge and get them on mic, that'd be great. So I'm going to open it up for.
I don't know if we're going to be able to get folks on camera without passing around a laptop, but that was Region 2, Rachel Pena, who asked that question.
Yeah, just an acknowledgement. We don't have to pass the camera around, just acknowledgement, because I can't tell if somebody wants to say anything over there. All right.
Michael, this is Marla.
Hi, Marla.
Michael, we got a question from Marla.
Thank you.
I wonder if, as a board, we can consider giving you authority to send up to the budgeted amount any year, so we don't have to do this each year. I mean, it seems like if we agree to the budget for that amount for AWS, why would we have to then give you the authority to spend that budget amount in that year? We already give you authority to spend all kinds of things within the budget, right? So
True.
Yes, that's true, but it's set up basically so we're acknowledging we know what that amount is and agreeing to it. And
why
it's
this
set.
amount in particular?
By the service area.
I'm speculating, but going back to when the contract was approved, it was a brand new contract. This is one of those contracts that used to be under Accenture for the on-premise
It sits on its own.
hosting. On its own, and we pulled that out, and the JPA had a direct contract now through the Department of Technology with a vendor for AWS services. And since it was a direct contract, I think for the first year or two, the board wanted to have a little bit more transparency as we're going through that. But I believe that's something that the board could consider if you would want to, that my authority is up to the budget amount and acknowledge that if we're going over the budget, before we do any reallocations or anything like that, that we come back. So even if we had it in the budget, we said, hey, it's 27 million that we're going to go up to next year, prior to going to that 27 million, that we wouldn't reallocate, that we would come there and I'd say, hey, we have a reallocation and we have a need, and this is why we're here.
So Marla, basically what I wanted is I wanted to align it with the other contracts. So we have a budget process that we go through. We know what the budget is for all of them. But John still comes to us and tells us that we have an amendment and we're going to be adding dollars to the Accenture contract or to the, and this one actually stands outside of those. So it's just coming to us similarly.
I see. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, it doesn't create any perfunctory around it. I actually just think it creates an awareness and we're aware of what we're approving. But we did make an agreement that it would be aligned with the budget, and that makes the discussion more straightforward.
Yeah.
So are there any questions, any comments that any of the other board members have on this particular item? Okay, any public comment on this side? Okay, then I will also move this one for approval.
I'll second. Becky?
Becky in the room here seconded it. All right. Marla, you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yes.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Thank you. Deborah Martinez?
Yes.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes.
Thank you. Melissa Livingston?
Yes.
Thank you. Deborah Bates?
Yes.
Thank you. Roxana?
Yes.
Thank you. And Rogelio?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. All right. That brings us to a long list of consent items that I'll go over quickly. The first one is the minutes. I'd like to do a quick review of the action items. For people that have it up, it's on page 6 of the action items. The first item, the quarterly fiscal update, Holly will be giving that. That's on the agenda. DEI update will be on our June membership meeting. We will have an update on that. Item 3, the update on training materials. June, are you on? Can you give a quick update?
I am. Thank you very much. So this update related to, we wanted to publicize what training materials are already available on the CalSAWS web portal, and we did put that CIT out 8722 on March 25th. We are also finalizing the plan and going to put out another CRFI to ask the counties if they're willing to share their induction materials. We just reviewed this ask and the process, the draft process with the training committee last week. So we intend to have the CRFI out shortly so that counties can share their training materials out on the web portal where other counties can take advantage of them.
Thank you, June. Appreciate the update. And I just wanted to acknowledge that Tracy Belton has joined us on the Zoom. And Tracy, I don't know exactly during the voting if where you came in. Is there any item that you listened to that you do want to make sure that your vote is acknowledged?
I just heard the last item and it was acknowledged. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. All right. Continuing on the action items, an update on the multi-factor authentication. Luz, are you on?
Yes, I am on. I just did want to give an update based on what we discussed last time. We are still on track to deploy that feature into production by the end of May. We completed pilot testing this last week, so we're preparing those features to be pushed into production, and then we'll work with the counties who are opting in for this feature.
Very good, and I see that Gilbert, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I just had a quick question on the pilot outcomes. Is it promising? Any issues? Any challenges? I know that there was a little bit of challenges on the very first day that was trying to go out and go live. Back, I think it was like on May 2nd or so. I forget exactly which day it was, but we got that rectified. I'm really curious about the pilot counties and how well it works and as an option for the SMS.
The notes I have are very positive once we got through that first day's worth of challenges. we've gotten positive results and we've closed the test cases.
And so then at this point in time, we're going to go live with that option on May 23rd?
That is correct. They'll go in and then we'll work with each one of the counties that have opted in to transition you appropriately.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Luce, is there another part of the presentation in the informationals where I know that Gilbert brought up concerns and I had shared some concerns with you about usability and trying to make it easier on our users around the counties on how many times they'd have to enter in the credentials.
Yes.
And then the other one was whether or not email is the only option. I just wanted to know, I haven't heard because it's probably been shared within the teams, but I hadn't heard how some of those things have been addressed.
So to address the is email the only option, we are enabling SMS, which is texting, and that's what we're looking to do on May 25th. On the MFA policy and extending it, there are various technical options that could be utilized. Some of them are impacting to the counties where we would have to put things onto county devices. So we're still exploring how to best implement elongated policy. So that's still work in progress.
So looking at some of the ones that are deployed, like the checkbox for
Right.
keep me in for a week, those kind of things.
Yeah, those kind of things, but all those require something on your device.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand some of them are managed, some of them are managed by the county. So we're just exploring to make sure, if that is the solution, we're gonna have to work to get all that kind of approved with each one of the counties, right? So we're just thinking through, there's other creative ways where we can minimize having to put deployment artifacts onto other people's machines.
Okay. As soon as you guys have some glimmer on some of the options that we may be able to pursue, I'd love to hear back on those.
Okay, I'll add that to the action item for next time.
Yep, we'll update the action item and make sure that that's brought back to, it'll probably be the July meeting, but we'll make sure the updates to the outcomes of the implementation are brought back. Okay. Action item 5 is on the agenda. Lulu Fu's going to give an update on that, and that's on onshore versus offshore coming back on that. This is really to set the stage today on what's going to be coming, and then we'll be tracking through the metrics in July. Keith Slas provide information on corrective action plan for some of the claiming items. I believe that's going to be addressed during the final acceptance discussion and some of the reports issues that we're going to be discussing next step. Aren't
That's correct.
Very good.
And there's a separate topic on it as well.
Okay, very good. Item 8 associated with the update on, I think it was imaging on that one. Arnold, maybe you could give a little bit of context on that.
And we do have a special topic on imaging as well, for both the update on the Los Angeles County rollout as well as looking forward to CalWIN.
Okay. And same thing with item 9, we'll address that one at that time as well.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. That is the minutes and a quick review of the action items. Also on the consent calendar is Accenture Change Notice 17, which includes the design associated with ARPA funding for the release of information. For Accenture, it's about just shy of $280,000 that is provided through ARPA funding, and decrements the sort of the amount that we have already allocated in the contract, and we use the ARPA funding to be able to go through that. So that is the follow-up to some of the ARPA items that the board approved last month. And again, Accenture on that ARPA funding, because it goes from Benefits Cal into CalSAWS, and there's changes to that API, that program interface, and impacts CalSAWS as well. Item C is the Accenture change notice for virtual assistants. And this is an interesting one because one of the items that we have on virtual assistants, when we were doing the innovation and the Shark Tank items, we've put that on hold. But San Diego County did a worker-facing as well as a customer-facing virtual assistant to answer staff questions that would come in, as well as public questions as we've gone forward. San Diego County felt that that was a very successful pilot. That got packaged into the IAPDU. Our state partners and federal partners approved funding to be able to expand that to all of the counties at the appropriate time. The pilot, as it exists right now, San Diego County wants to continue that until the project funding kicks in October. And we're bringing this to the board to approve that activity because we know that Rick and his team need the board to acknowledge that that's within the scope of CalSAWS in order for him to process that county purchase locally in San Diego County. As he can go forward, that the board's acknowledged that that's in scope and it's already been approved for funding by state and federal as we go forward. And it's separate funding from all of the other core activities that we're moving forward on. So that's also included in that, and the money's has been included in our budget for 22-23. And the reason it starts with the federal fiscal year is that's where we've sort of mapped those things out with our federal partners. Deloitte Change Order 3, Work Order 5 is the ARPA funding for the design of the release of information, working through that. Very complex topic to look at, not just the technical implications, but there's a lot of operational and policy implications on how that needs to be accommodated in Benefits Cal as well as in CalSAWS. So that is a work order for them to begin that important work. And then there is Change Order 3 for Deloitte. There's some additional work with Get Cal Fresh. Really, it's extending some work that we were doing from the Benefits Cal side for security monitoring. We know that there was some applications that were challenging that came through earlier this last year, and we've been really working with Code for America and the team. They've been doing some additional scans, sort of doing some geofencing and looking at where they're getting applications from. We've been doing some additional monitoring, and we're sort of catching up that we've had some additional security monitoring that's happened on the Deloitte side to be able to assist us with this. It sort of brings it through what's needed this fiscal year. We don't believe we're going to need that next fiscal year because of the changes that Code for America has put into Get Cal Fresh, and we won't need those services from Deloitte to see what's front-ending our Benefits Cal system. So that's just catching that up. We have ClearBest Change Order 6, which is having ClearBest do QA work on the release of information design and working through that. And then we have ClearBest work order, which is for them to continue to do QA services for OCAT and aligning that through October 31st of 2023 and working through those requirements and any enhancements on that. So that's a long list of consent items that are open for board questions or consideration.
Thank you, John. Gilbert had his hand up, so it's back up again. Gilbert.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to get back in on MFA just really quick. Were we going to get any particular training or documents to help us make sure we're clear on how it works, so we can make sure that the counties have the ability to properly educate their staff how to use it best?
Yes, we've created a draft FAQ, which is in process of being reviewed, so we can send that out mid next week so folks can start to take a look at it prior to the release.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And John, on the OCAT QA services, wasn't that on a previous board agenda, or is this another slice to it, that last G?
I think it's just extending it all the way through 2023 and syncing that up.
Okay, it's the alignment part. Okay,
Yep.
I know there was something on that. Other questions or comments from our board members or state partners on any of the items that are in the consent calendar?
Nothing in the room, Michael.
I was going to say, anybody at the library galleria? Okay. All right, then hearing none, how about any public comment on this collection of items? Okay, I'm hearing none there. Is there a motion to approve these as a group?
This is Deborah. I'll move the slate.
This is Rachel,
Thanks,
second.
Very good. Marla, do you approve?
Yes.
Tracy, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you, Tracy. Becky, you approve?
Yes.
Very good. Chris?
Yes.
Thank you. Deborah Martinez?
Yes.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes.
Thank you. Melissa Livingston?
Yes.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes.
Roxana?
Yes.
Thank you. And Rogelio?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, I think that brings us to the end of our action items, and now we're into our informational items.
Okay, hello, everybody. This is Arnold Malvik, and I'll give you an overview of where we are coming out of our Los Angeles County Imaging Go Live. So in short, where it has been a very smooth overall implementation. One of the comments that we had from the C4 counties was we didn't even realize that LA went live, which was very good from a perspective of all the performance testing that was done leading up to it, and all the tuning resulted in a system that is performing. In addition, with the defects that were resolved prior to the LA go live, the C4 counties were able to decommission a lot of the workarounds that were in place. So the system is now performing from a functional perspective as well as from a response time perspective. We've also continued with the ongoing support for Los Angeles County, and the other counties are able to join those calls. They're currently Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays to bring any questions to the table. And the enhanced communications are still going on. So overall, it's been a smooth release, and we, again, thank everybody for the partnership over these months. We know that it has been trying for the C4 counties, and we were able to work with our Highland vendor to have a system that is performing as is intended. And we believe that we have a good system ready for the Calwin counties as well. If we move on to the next slide.
Arnold, one thing I wanted to add on that is in discussions with some of our former C4 counties, I've also offered that if there any of we know that we did a lot of enhancements, we know that we've done a lot of performance tuning, it's resulted in a good transition with Los Angeles County, but if there's still some items where we need to do a site visit to a particular county, that they should be inquiring with me or with the regional managers to make sure that we can do that on-site site visit to be able to further our C4 counties in sort of a recovery mode as they start looking at the improvements and maybe retiring some of those items.
That's correct, and we had some of our team members out at Napa this week, and for exactly that purpose, and received very good feedback on how the system is performing. So we will continue, as counties request, we will continue to provide that high touch to work through any of those. So definitely reach out to us, and we will continue with the enhanced communications as well as assisting the counties and producing those quick tip items and the vignettes on the training that the counties have found helpful.
Yeah, and thank you to Arnold and the team and also the project for being responsive to the concerns that we expressed, and also to our partners out in Riverside, San Bernardino, and the other former C4 counties for expressing what was working and not working for you so that we could try to address that for all of us. And we want to continue, as John said, to invite you to share if you're having anything that's impacting your operations related to imaging, to share that with the project, because that'll only benefit the next 18 counties coming on as well as ourselves. So really want to make sure that we keep replicating that process and sharing what's working and what's not working.
Yes, absolutely. And we still have a list of low and medium impact defects that are in the queue to be worked as we come out of the stabilization phase for Los Angeles County. we'll be able to publish what those dates look like. And then there's a little bit more in another couple of slides on this. So giving a snapshot of what we're seeing from production right now, and this is really for that week of go live. With this use case and the flow that we have on the screen, this is more of a submission from Benefits Cal. So this would be the applicant submitting the documents through Benefits Cal. And what we're seeing is that it's viewable by the caseworker in under 15 seconds. In a lot of cases, we're seeing it under 1 to 2 seconds. So very strong response time there. And then it goes through the workflow, and within 15 minutes, we're able to see that the task has been generated for the case. And then within 20 minutes, it's hitting the person level queue if that's where it needs to be, if it's a person level document, and it's archived within 30 minutes. So we're seeing those were the results that we saw in the performance test, and production is resulting in the same performance as well. So very good overall, resulting in that feedback. If we move on to the next slide. This next case is more if it's a caseworker doing the image capture, so doing the scan of the document, or if it's an applicant using one of the lobby kiosks to capture the document. Once again, we're seeing that those documents are available within 15 seconds. In a lot of cases, it's under 5 seconds. So again, very quick response time. Then as it processes through OCR, we're seeing within 40 minutes to 45 minutes, the task being generated and hitting archive in under an hour. So again, from a workflow perspective, the images are viewable to the caseworker from 1 to 2 seconds of submission and image capture all the way through the working process. So it is being supportive of the workflow in the offices. If we move to the next slide. From an overall volume perspective, we're seeing, as we expected, about twice the volume coming through now that Los Angeles County is contributing. The chart on the left has 10 days of data, and so we have over 940,000 images or documents captured versus the previous 2 weeks of 14 days, we are at 657,000. So we're seeing the expected volumes. The other positive, and we take this check-in during the Los Angeles County 4 o'clock meetings, is our reports are that there's zero backlog of images. So the workers are able to keep up with the flow of the documents in the imaging function in Los Angeles County. And we're also receiving that confirmation from our C4 counties as well. If we move to the next slide, please. So this gets into, there's still work to do. We had completed the 13 items since go live since the 25th. And we still have 9 more that are being tracked for completion and implementation by the end of May. There was also a list of defects that were deferred past the Los Angeles go live that are in that list, and we are sequencing those as well. So those include items around confidentiality rules. So there's been some questions around the visibility of those cases marked with confidentiality. Lobby and kiosk generated documents and updating the associated what's called metadata, or some of the tagging information as to what it is, when it was captured, who it was captured for. Form name fixes, office mappings, Benefits Cal office search logic, as well as Get Cal Fresh bundle logic. So there's still discussions also going on in those areas to refine those requirements as we design the changes that will go forward. If we move to the next slide. So as we were going through the Los Angeles County go live, we had project teams, 4 different teams on site at the various Los Angeles County service centers and offices, and we were able to directly observe how the rollout was going, and we were also able to identify some quick tips that we published out to the distribution around some of the queue management and how and where to find the images, because it is a little bit different than what the legacy Los Angeles system did, how to review and re-index documents, how to address the issue of cutoff barcodes from both a print and a scan perspective, as well as emphasizing the OCR best practices so that you increase the efficiency of the optical character recognition, which does the read of the images and helps populate the metadata. So in being able to have that direct observation, we were able to shorten the learning curve and share those practices across the counties, which increase user productivity. If we move on to the next slide, please. We're going to continue with the enhanced communication. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you see the CalSAWS fact sheet, and this is just one of the use cases for the file upload for multiple cases. And then on the right-hand side, it's a refresh of the training materials that are available to the counties. So we are continuing to distribute the material and enhance it as further learnings are coming in from both the C4 counties and Los Angeles County. And these will be available for the CalWIN counties as we look forward to the CalWIN migrations and go live. So we'll continue to build on the library of knowledge and be able to share that to help facilitate a smooth transition for the CalWIN counties. We move on to the next slide.
And Arnold, I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I've heard really good feedback from the counties that now sort of the imaging communication that we had to ramp up, but that imaging communication, that amount of detail has now become sort of the bar on some complicated issues, and I know that we're going to be talking about reports a little bit later and see how we can sort of bridge that gap with similar types of communication, but hats off to the imaging team on sort of closing that gap and that communication on what was a complicated issue that we were sort of working through.
Yes, and it was a great partnership with the counties as well as Highland, our vendor, in coming up forward with some of those solutions as well as the communication. So we appreciate the partnership of the project team overall.
So Michael, that concludes that update. And again, to you and your team, the partnership with LA on the detailed walkthroughs that we had as we went through testing, the investment and validation testing, moving the images over, validating the images. This is definitely a team sport that paid off as we went live in LA that has benefited all 40 counties.
Yeah, and it was really good to see that the effort put in actually influenced the outcome that came out of this. We had a much smoother landing than definitely would have happened if we hadn't invested the resources both on a county side and also the project, and also made sure we had the runway that we needed to get the major defects fixed before we went live and had our operations impacted. So I think this was a real good example of us partnering on both sides, making sure the resources are there adequately to address them, and that we're hearing each other. And so I do want to thank everybody, including my team, and also the project on being able to sort of narrow it down and focus on the things that really do make a difference, and for the project being able to get Highland to take a look at the way the tuning works in their own platform and make sure that platform is going to work for us. And I think this is a good confidence builder as we look at CalWIN and bringing them aboard on this platform. So thank you for that presentation, Arnold. And I want to open it up to comments, questions from our other board members or our state partners.
Michael, I would just echo your comments. You know, we are 2/3 of the way there, and it was a much smoother transition than we've had in some of the other shifts that we've done. And it was definitely the pre-work that was done by the team, the collaboration between the staff and the coordination of all of the parties that have been involved in this, that it's gone so smooth in this shift, and just really a great job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gilbert, I see your hand up.
Thanks. So I was just going to comment that I know that I've been vocal about imaging and some of the challenges that we've needed to overcome, and you know, just trying to be as honest with feedback as possible, looking for solutions. I have to say that the work that was done in pausing to get before we went live with LA County to make sure that we got some of these bugs fixed and some of the concerns that we had, get those corrected first. before LA came up, I think really has proven successful because from what I'm hearing locally, though we had some concerns here and there, the effort that we needed to undertake we're seeing the fruits as well. I guess what I'm saying is that the success that LA County has had, we're seeing some of that fruits as well with the extra effort that has been put in to make sure that this came over seamlessly. And to that point, April 25th, we all kind of held our breaths a little bit, but you know what? It was fine. It was absolutely fine. We did not see any downtime, any degradation, any issues or challenges. So congratulations.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you.
that cutover weekend, we were all hanging on the updates throughout. I woke up every couple hours checking to make sure we were coming up on Monday. So yeah, so we do have to stop and give kudos where it's deserved, and I do think that this was really a good example. Also, I want to reemphasize the extension out to Gilbert, to Sayori, to other directors who shared from the former C4 counties, some of the things that they were really compensating for, that we could look at from an LA magnitudes perspective and the project jumped on those to figure out how do we address that before it blows up, because LA probably would have blew it up. And this was a good decision for us to make this pause, or if you call it a slight delay to the implementation, to make sure it's successful. And we're still on budget and still on time. And that's not always something you can achieve on these large projects. So let's keep that momentum going. Again, I want to open up to any other critiques or any other questions or any other things that the directors and our state partners would like to say on this item before we go ahead and move it forward. Okay. Hearing none, any public comment on this? Okay, great. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you very much, Arnold, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. So before I jump into the financial report, I did want to give just a very quick update. The May revise was released today. My team has looked through, and at a first pass, all of the major programs look good. They're drilling down into the details, and so if there are any issues, we'll work with the state on that. But first pass looks good, so it's good news. So we can go ahead and jump to the next slide, page 17. So for the update today, I wanted to highlight a few key changes since our last update, and the report now reflects partial actuals through June payment month for our vendor costs. We do still have some things we're working through, and we also have 3 months of outstanding claims or claims to be submitted over the next 3 months from our counties because of that lag time. But as mentioned at the last quarterly update, the PMO team did submit an IAPDU for CalSAWS on January 31st. That APD was approved. We have updated the allocations to align to that APD, as well as updates to our county projections and vendor projections where we've applied additional line item adjustments. So for CalSAWS, in that first category, we're expected to utilize 98% with savings in both the base CalSAWS as well as premise. That first box includes both premise and CalSAWS. Without premise, the CalSAWS would be at 99% utilization. The bulk of that savings is in our staff and travel. For CalWIN, we did just submit a CalWIN OAPDU, an operational APD, and that we did include reductions through our CalHERES. As you've seen in the past, we had significant savings, so we went ahead and applied that reduction. We do still see savings in that area, though, plus some staff and travel. There's been no changes to our C4 or LRS categories, and then based on the overall updated allocations, updates to the projections, we are targeting 97% across the board. On the next page, we'll do a drill down into the consortium personnel. You can see, again, as I mentioned, there's some staff savings there. The companion FTE details are provided on the bottom of this page. We are currently going through a selection of candidates for the most recent recruitment. And then we also just issued a new recruitment for positions that are going to be starting up in the new state fiscal year. And we also have some backfills. Our next page goes into the maintenance and enhancements costs. And as previously mentioned, we see the CalHER savings there. Additional details that correspond to those costs are on slide 20. And so for this report, we did shift to a service month report for the reporting purposes. It just provided a little more clarity, I think. We did go ahead and retire the C4 and LRS categories off of this page because no changes have been made since the last report. That top category for CalWIN, we've turned it a little lower in the last couple of months, but we're working through final approvals for several projects as we approach the end of the year. For CalSAWS, we had previously reported we had increased the M&E capacity to address those several post-go-live gaps, as well as client correspondence. We're on track there. And then Benefits Cal, we're also expected to utilize 100% of those hours. There's a lot of additional detail behind those hours in an attachment to the board packet. For the next slide, we identify our contract obligations. These are, the first table is related to those incidents that occur that break an SLA, and we track and have liquidated damage. And we track those through a clearing process through invoices. We did consolidate previous months for anything that was cleared through December invoices, and then the remainder are those that have been cleared or are about to be cleared since December. On the bottom page, we have our hours and credits. We did retire the C4 category as no further changes have been made for that contract. That contract is now closed. I think the main thing on this one is we continue to track our what we call modernization hours for CalWIN, and those are the hours used for projects associated with CalSAWS, such as CalWIN updates in support of conversion. And then the next slide is our change notice tracking details, which has been updated through today's board meeting. And you can see the balance remaining in each of those contracts after the changes have been approved. Okay. So now I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and move into a deeper dive into county support staff funding. We have received several questions from directors regarding this funding and what's available and how can we use it. So we wanted to bring to this group an update on this topic and provide some clarification. We're also sharing this information with our PSC next week. We've shared it with OPAC and also the county fiscal contacts that we have that join us for a quarterly fiscal conference call. There are three categories that we're going to walk through today. Page 23, planning and preparation funding is the first. That's a category that's specific to CalWIN. And then we have manual conversion and the ancillary funding, which is for both CalWIN and the former C4 counties. And then LA County received an allocation through the CalACES IAPDU up through September, and then was provided an allocation as of October through CalSAWS. What's not included in the funding is hours or costs for your staff to participate in UAT or for your staff to take training. We do have travel funds should they need to travel to a location to participate in those activities. So with that, I'll drill down into the first category on page 24, the planning and prep category. And so this was the funding that was specific to the CalWIN counties only. For background, the funding started in state fiscal year 1920. It was extended through June 2022 when we did the 9-month schedule extension. The cost basis was a small, medium, large county size formula that we had previously used for the CalWIN counties. And that funding was intended to address a gap between the start of manual conversion and the ancillary funding.
It was to cover the preparation for those upcoming activities. And some of you might recall that funding wasn't originally approved by the state, but we did go through an escalation by the directors, and we were able to secure that funding for a limited period on the basis that Cowan had a bigger lift to migrate. That funding came with certain conditions, one of which is that counties have to document how those funds are being utilized. So we go through a quarterly reporting process with the Cowan counties, and that's tied into the claiming process. So because that funding was to address that gap period, it does conclude at the end of this state fiscal year. The next category is manual conversion funding on the next page. And this funding was originally allocated for 8 months prior to go live with an additional 4 months after. And I do want to make a clarification here because I have gotten confused on this myself in the past. The costs are based on, they were originally based on an independent third-party vendor. It equates to 1 hour per case for 10% of the cases, or 10 minutes per case for all cases, or 25 minutes for 25% of the cases. And during planning, we had looked at multiple models and past projects in California and at other states to determine the best approach for these funds. And it's intended to cover the task for when you touch the case to take some action, and we do consider touching documents for document migration an allowable cost. For ancillary funding on page 26, this funding was originally 12 months in advance of go live. This too was also based on an independent third-party analysis based on the assumptions that counties would have a number of reports that would need attention and retooling. You have systems outside of the purview of CalWIN that would need to be addressed. And so that funding is intended to mitigate the costs for those efforts, whether that's additional local county staff or it could be a vendor. But these are all costs for services and not commodities. So bringing us to the next page, so the original costs were allocated based on the certain assumptions and conditions and timing. We have offered counties opportunities to request adjustments through the CRFI process. And this is a process we've actually been using for our Cowan counties for several years now, and so that's has worked well. And so starting in September, October of 2020, we issued the first CRFI, where you could request additional funds or you could shift funds. And the most recent CRFI we issued was just in April. Our next opportunity will be in the October 2022 timeframe. And then the next page, we could jump to that. We don't guarantee we can accommodate all requests, but we do make every effort to do so. We have been able to accommodate all requests with a couple of exceptions. The first was we partially accommodated a request that came in last fall, and we asked the county to hold until the spring so we could make sure we could balance, and we were able to address that and work through that with them, and their request was accommodated in this last round. The other exception has been we have had requests to shift funding in the planning and preparation category to next fiscal year, but because that funding concludes this year, and now all counties will have access to their manual conversion and ancillary funding, we have not shifted those funds. So those are the two exceptions that we've had over these last several CRFIs. Your other option for counties is to reach out to PMO.fiscal. We have an email that we set up. We've shared this with your county fiscal contacts. They can reach us to ask questions. If you need a shift, we will do our best to accommodate that as quickly as we can. You can shift within your line items. The CRFIs are timed to align to the budget cycle, so the state budget cycle. So it's important to know that those we can work through into our IAPDUs. And the next page, I did want to address a question that we had received is, do we have any additional funds? And so because of the prior CRFIs, we have been able to establish a reserve, and we've used that to accommodate the CRFI requests that we've had since then, and also preserve those in our IAPDUs for future years. So for the for next year, we'll have $846,000 that we'll be able to distribute across the counties, and we'll use that CRFI process to address those requests. In, say, fiscal year 23-24, we'll have $471,000 that we'll be able to accommodate requests up to that amount in that year. And then we may have some additional reserve based on the most recent CRFI. There are some dependencies, and we'll have to work that through the IAPDU process. But we do make every effort to preserve whatever we can. If counties have responded, they do not need all of their funds. The next page is your eye chart for the day, and you can take that offline, zoom in if you want to see your county-specific amounts. Your counties have been given this information. We've shared this information. We are working through the allocation updates, and you'll get your letters in the next couple of weeks. So with that, I'll pause there and see if there are any questions.
Sorry, I'm going to be up there. I know, I recognize all the work, and I recognize all the planning that went to sort of estimating what counties would be planning, but then conversion. But I do think that there was a significant amount of underestimation of what the work is in regards to the amount of resources that counties that have both already gone up and continue to have to pull from the line for post-conversion challenges that hopefully now that imaging is done and working really well can be redirected back to the line. But as with any conversion, right, no matter how well we plan it, no matter how well we design it, there's always going to be a challenge when you flip the switch, right? And so if I just look at just my training resources, I'm just going to just speak to myself. You know, the funding we've gotten, we've already allocated positions to work on, you know, to act as my SMEs, to address all the requests for information, to start working with Deloitte on the change management. But then when I start to look at what I'm going to need just from a training resource perspective, when you're looking at, I have to train 2,300 staff in a short amount of time, and yes, I recognize that the project will do the functionality training, but what the project's not going to do is program refresher training, operational training, procedure writing, right? Training the new ancillaries, training new workflows. And so when you look at how many classrooms concurrently I'm going to have, then we're looking at, you know, if I run 30 to 40 to 50 concurrent classes, you know, because you can't train them 6 months before you go live, they'll never remember it, right? So you've got a short window to do that. And then, because there's hands-on practical, the coaches that are also needed to support those classrooms, I'm looking at about 100 resources for that 6 to 8 week period of time that has to come from somewhere. And so I think dealing with these peaks, probably hindsight, that was 2020, we probably could have done a better job of looking at what those limited term resource needs were going to be, right? And try to pre-do some of that work. And then I also think that hindsight, we probably wanted to do a little bit more planning of the things that could have gone wrong, that would have required some additional county resources, and had that work to have some contingency funding for those sort of unanticipated conversion challenges. So when you talked about Riverside County needing 17 people to just do the exception queue, that's 17 resources that didn't plan, and that's for one challenge, right? And so my last parting, because I know it's only been a few months ago, as we go through this, we really do need to advocate when we have an opportunity, is really push back a little bit of saying, you need to understand and quantify the amount of work, the amount of resources that counties have to pull from the line that means one less person I can help, right? And so these are dedicated resources. Yes, it may be for a limited amount of time, but I need to pull those resources, but then I need to backfill that response. Because I still need to issue CalFresh, I still need to put CalWorks, right? I still need to serve my public. And so, and then to build in some contingency funding for the unanticipated, right? Because I think with any systems conversion, there's always unanticipated. And I think those are, I do think it's short peak work, you know, until the problems are resolved. But I would hope that the next time we have an opportunity to revisit our budget, that we start to advocate for some of the cleanup work that has to happen, some of the retraining that has to happen, the coaching that has to happen, and so that counties have a little bit more support on the ground. Because we are pulling resources from the line, but I need someone to backfill those resources, and we're using extra help, retirees, you know, that's what we're planning, right? So it's, you know, when I look at just my training, and I looked at my training chart, and I looked at just what they think, it's 100 people. But 95, and you only funded 5, so I got 95 I had to pull from the line. But I think we just need to think about that from that perspective, and so I know this is all estimations, and we used a third-party vendor, and we did the best we could, but historically, we've always underfunded what I call unknown work, and I think as you move forward, and if there is an opportunity, we need to be having those discussions. Because the last thing I want to do is impact a recipient getting what they need, because I've had to divert a resource to do cleanup work. Okay? And so the banner cases, the counties that are going to go live 2 months before COLA, they're going to have to do some prioritization. How do we get them the resources they need to be able to divert those resources for that limited amount of time to get through COLA? And so those are the things that I think we as a JPA really need to start sort of planning for. My recommendation.
Just a quick response, fair point. And one of the things is, so we need to make sure that we completely utilize the money that we have.
Right.
And that we get those claims submitted, and that we utilize the money that we have, and acknowledge that there are big chunks of activities in the counties that are not covered. And, you know, as your project, we're willing to explore those items. As with any budgeting process that you guys do better than us, it's a negotiation. And Dan, I think we're going to need some support from the state to be able to have some dialogue, look at the next opportunity for reallocation or enhancement associated with this. Since this is our statewide system, our C4 counties have been working real hard on some items that are associated with the cutover, as well as the Calhoun counties. So as we utilize this money and we have gaps, flexibility in reallocations or supplement is something we can explore, but we got to see where the state is on that, and sort of explore that with OSI, CDSS, and DHCS as well. So we can acknowledge that and start putting that together, Dan, and then we would need to work with your team to be able to do that.
Sean, one recommendation is we've got the counties that have already gone live. They've received their allocation. We shall be able to tell you above and beyond what you funded, here's what I also had to contribute, and where's that gap? And I think counties probably have some really good idea of how many additional above what was funded that we're basically pulling resources from the line to do the work in, to be able to try and understand the magnitude of the gap. Because I think when we do that analysis, you're going to see there's a big gap.
We can go back to our C4 counties and start to do that calculation and reach out to be able to do those estimates and look at that. Dan, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in on the conversation or.
Hi, John. Thanks for giving me a moment. I heard the conversation. I acknowledge it and would be happy to engage with our team to have that conversation. while we look backward towards C4 and their engagement and the effort, I think we also need to consider that Cal-Win counties have a little bit of a higher hurdle to jump, going from a different system completely to this system where C4 and LRS were sort of brother and sister. So let's just consider that as we think about this.
Very good. We appreciate the openness to the dialogue, and we'll start working on that.
Thank you.
Marla has a question.
John, so I just wanted to respond to that a little bit with a couple comments. One is, it's not just human resources. I wasn't here when the budgets were made, but we're gonna have to rent temporary space for classrooms, fill them with computers and equipment, and those are actual cash dollars that we have to spend that I don't think are in our budgets. I don't see them in the budget, so that's one. Two, I think it's a great idea for the counties to report to you what the costs have been, because we do have historically this process in the state where we can get reimbursed for unfunded mandates. You know, if you think about that process, maybe we can get replacement or reimbursement at some point, which would make it a little, if that's a possibility at all, makes it a little bit easier for us to get county general fund kind of upfront to pay for some of these costs.
And on the training on the space, I will tell you, I will just add to this, that the messaging we're receiving in our end from our vendor is that they're gonna do the renting of the space, the additional classrooms, and that we don't have to worry about that.
Well, so I don't know about Coach Costa yet, but in Solano County, they came out and they said, your space is perfect, it's fine. And we know for a fact it is not. It is not. Plus, we're still gonna have induction classes running in those spaces. And all the other just kind of normal classes and trainings that we do. So we know it's not sufficient, and we're gonna have to get.
So we can work through that, because facilities are in our ISS contract. So let's,
Okay,
if there is,
maybe we just need to ask,
or maybe we need to look at if there's a delta between what's perceived as perfect and what is perfect, and those types of things. Maybe we need to have a conversation to be able to make sure that we're looking at things the same way and investigate those things instead of just assuming that it's on the county. So let's take a look at those if there are those types of issues.
And then just, I was speaking very personally for my county, but as a board director, it would be interesting for me to see a table like this table on slide, 20. The slides are great big eye candy for the day.
Yeah.
What was that one? It'd be interesting for me to see a table like this, that these I'm assuming are the allocated costs. But I'd like to see at the end of the year, how much shifting has there been? Where have we really seen where counties did underspend and then other counties asked for more, and kind of what did that shifting look like?
I can share that information, absolutely. Bring it back as an action item. We have the results of the CRFIs. We are trending, counties are trending under their allocation.
Yeah, see, that's,
And not all counties were ready to return, you know, the redistribution.
right.
So we assume that they will spend those differently.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a really big item, because as we look to people, there's a little bit of disconnect that we see in actual numbers. And I think the concern about not having enough money, and we think that they're in different categories. So we need to make sure that we're drilling down, completely utilizing the money that we've been allocated, and we can show you the movement on this chart, and then be able to utilize those items. And then, yes, there's unfunded items, and then, you know, as Dan said, we could have conversations on the ability to use underfunding to be able to make up some of those gaps, or supplement funding. Yeah, and we do have a chat item from Angela. Trending under is deceptive, and we know that that's because of claiming as well, and the lag time in claiming. So we know that we still have that buffer period where we have to do claims, and as we're trending. So knowing that there's 3 additional months in order to submit the claims and do that, that's another reason we're bringing there is, please, 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 Holly's been saying this, you don't have to carry the message. the PMO team's been doing that with the fiscal managers, is get those claims in, and let's do that, because we don't, you know, we want to make sure that we're utilizing every single dollar we can appropriately.
It might be helpful to do some best practices, sheets here, because, you know, there's a lot that's going on here. Like one of them is all the meetings we have.
Yes.
They're all doing 2 hours here, 2 hours here. They are not all time studying,
Correct.
right? And
I think that's
figuring out how to get them to all time. I mean, this is on the counties, right? We need to figure out how to claim dollars. And so maybe it'd be helpful at some point to get some best practices from counties and put out some best practice suggestions for how to kind of, you know, manage this.
And
Such a good idea too, because so many of these activities are activities we already do, we already capture in other ways, but we're doing more of them.
Right.
And even for a small county, I feel like I haven't done a great job of communicating with my fiscal staff. I can't even imagine what that must be like in larger counties. So I don't know that we're capturing all of our activities in the
Time studying is not as easy as you think.
Oh my God,
for everybody else, right?
It's so hard. Yeah.
Well, they never want to plug into the ICR.
Right. I love that idea though.
One of the, items that has been brought to OCAP are, you know, best practices and ideas that the OCAP members have been bringing. And so they've had, you know, about their organization charts and, you know, how they compete on the local level, what are the ideas they've shared across the county. I can also revisit topics with fiscal needs. We have touched upon time studying. I've heard that it is a challenge just to get a code set up, right?
Yeah.
So, but I can bring that back to the fiscal person as well.
Michael, I think Gilbert has his hand up as well to hop in.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in regards to the underfunding, and I'm speaking as a C4 county, not a Cal-Win county, but one of the challenges that we have, and I think it goes to Deborah's comments early on about the limitation in resources that are available. We had to, you know, the best way we saw it possible to spend the money that we could have was like pull out some staff that would just focus on this, the deduplication, and case banners and things like that. But to like what Deborah had said, there's still work to be done. There's still regular work to be done, taking applications, processing reevaluations, answering calls, you know, addressing the public's needs. And so that could also be part of the explanation why some counties are underspending, is because we don't have the resources to spend. And as we've all been talking about, and I'll bring this up later, is just staffing in general. There's no staffing to be had. So even if we're going to hire temporary staff, they're not to be had, you know, so these are things that need to be taken into consideration. I think Marla point about best practices of how counties have been doing it and time studying and trying to maximize it. I think it's a great idea. And I think it is something that we could probably pull together, maybe share with our regional managers, and they can maybe put together, just like query the counties and put together information and be able to spread it amongst everybody, so they can just kind of take a look at some best practice on how to spend. And then John, one last thought about this is to your point, how Marla was a little bit confused or concerned about what was covered or not covered based on what the training team was telling her. You know, I think that maybe goes to show that maybe is there a way to provide just a clear document as to what is covered, what is included, what the county needs to be aware of, and what's budgeted into the project's budget.
I think that's a great point. I mean, this presentation is doing exactly what we wanted it to do today, is to start doing that. And then in addition to that, I think Gilbert's suggestion on the continued suggestion on best practices. I see head shaking in the room. We can have our PMO team work with our regional managers to pull those together and start working on some of the best practices, or what's the forum for that. And then if we can pull together also a cheat sheet on, you know, things that are funded within which contracts or with what allocations you have. So fiscal managers have a quick cheat sheet for that, and we can make sure that gets disseminated to the directors as well, so that that's there. We could take that action item as well.
I have one other idea. This thing about staffing, I mean, it is real that we are understaffed. And there are no temp eligibility workers out there. All of this work is eligibility work. We can't just hire somebody from a temp agency to do the work. So, you know, there is, what is this, Solutions West, I think, is a company that you can get eligibility workers from, and they claim that they have retired eligibility workers. I wonder if the project could contract with or do something around creating a temp agency that draws from the whole state of retired people or whoever that know eligibility work. Because we don't have time, we also don't have time to find, you know, we don't have time to go out and find retired eligibility workers and then do a contract for 3 of them or whatever. If you guys could stand up a temp agency of eligibility workers, that would be helpful.
First,
or trainers and
well, just a quick item, and we could maybe table it is that the purpose of the JPA was for the system and for the technology and to stand that up. The JPA has not crossed that line into saying that project should be crossing the line into providing any type of operations. And that feels a little bit like it's crossing the line on that. I'm not saying we can't do that, but that is a clear line in my mind that I would think would have to have a lot of planning and dialogue, and maybe would impact the JPA agreement itself and the purpose of the JPA. And why it was stood up.
It's a very fine line.
Yeah, and you know, even as we look at Benefits Cal coming up and the technical sort of help desk that we need to sort of provide, we know that those relationships with those customers are owned by the county. But we know that we have to be able to provide technical support behind that. And so, you know, those are lines that we have not crossed.
It is technical from the sense of if we get temporary employees to do our data cleanup, that's getting ready for the system, right? That system work, not to come in and do not to make our eligibility determinations for our current work, but this job of, you know, cleanup.
I've had a number of vendors contacting me, very interested and looking at those things. I've drawn that line pretty clear that supplementing eligibility staff, whether it be cleanup activities or case processing activities or customer service activities, are really the county's job to be able to do. So I'd have to look to the board to say, is that something that should or needs to be revisited? But that line's been pretty clear to me.
My thing is, Marla, it's a great idea. I think the challenge is that many counties are gonna run into very significant labor management issues in regards to contracting out.
I know.
And so I agree with John that I don't believe that's the role of the JPA, that we really need to maintain those clear lines. But a county is free to pursue that as a local solution, if you can, but.
A retiree might stand up an agency.
Well, yeah, what I do is I get the list of everyone, like you, yeah, I know, you're funny. I get the list of all the retired, I ask my HR, give me all the staff that retired 6 months ago. Yeah.
So John, this is obviously a really hot topic. And I think it probably behooves us to have a more dedicated discussion around strategies around resourcing, especially for the Cowan counties heading into the next phases of the project. And maybe the project can not necessarily dive into how to provide eligibility staff, but to have the discussion on how the counties are going to, what options they have, what they're doing, so that everybody's aware of what one another is going to be doing on this, rather than it be sort of a passive approach to it. Because I think the resourcing is going to really play key into success on this.
And Michael, I'm coming back because I want to make sure that we're hitting the mark, not going too far, and it's incremental, because as you know, we have a lot on our plate and we're having a hard time keeping up with what's on our plate. So I want to make sure that we don't divert our attention from items. But what I've heard is counties sharing best practices in how they're preparing, planning, utilizing staff, and the staff drain associated specifically with CalSAWS and what people are doing. And our ISS team is going to be helping plan with the counties to take care of yellow banner cases and how they go through that. So sort of some best practices in that realm is an action item. Another action item is the chart, the eye chart that's up. Look at the movement of money, so directors have clarity in where there is spend and underspend and where that is, and the movement of that, and share that with fiscal managers. Also, the action item was to go back and query our former C4 counties to say what were the uncovered expenses where there was county-specific investment. Is there a way to capture that in something that makes sense to be able to show the gap, which could be a basis for conversation for flexibility in budgeting or supplementing budgeting with the state? And I think that sort of wraps up the action item that I think we can make incremental progress on, but that's where I think the line is on that.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead, was that Marla again?
Yeah, sorry, was there an action item around having some conversations with the state about whether there's additional funding available?
Yeah.
I think
Did
that,
you just say that?
yeah, I think we got to work with OSI on either the flexibility or the supplement, and the supplement has to come through our normal budgeting process. Okay?
Yeah, and John, I'm respectful of what lines of demarcation we have for the project in the county. I just want to make sure that this becomes a little bit more of the focus. I think Deborah brought it up for a good reason, a little more of the focus around readiness. I mean, and the awareness the project has of what the county's readiness is in these areas. It's not that the project necessarily solving it, but they're providing options, making sure that the county's aware of what's available to them and also what they're doing with it. I think we all got to be really on board with that. And I don't want surprises that we move forward with the system, but yet the adjustment on the ground's not quite there. Because if either of those are not in alignment, we're gonna have trouble. Okay, that was a hearty discussion.
It definitely was, and I know we're running a bit behind on these items, so we'll take those action items and we'll put them on, probably start looping back on some of them and give you an update of where we're at on July. We have the membership meeting in June. So Michael, anything else? And I don't know, did we do public comment on that?
We didn't. So I think that was director comment for sure. So I'll go ahead and open for public comment if there's public comment on this side. Okay, not hearing any. I think we've got our work cut out for us to really try to lay this stuff out. Thank you, John. Thank you, directors. That's exactly what we need to march forward with. So let's go ahead and move on to the next item then. And I believe that's final acceptance. Is that right, John?
Yeah, specifically, it's a follow-up from last month where we went over the CalACES migration final acceptance. We're going to have another acceptance, and it's an update from that. So, Arnold?
Yes. Thank you very much. And as John said, this is an update to the discussion that we had last month where we reviewed preliminary results of the March performance, and now I will go through the April performance and talk through next steps, requesting director discretion and approval of final acceptance for CalACES. So just at a high level, the CalACES migration contained over 441 requirements related to the C4 counties migration to CalSAWS. Took over 500,000 hours of work to complete. Based upon the performance to date, we believe the CalSAWS system is meeting performance requirements, and that the application contains 0 non-cosmetic defects related to the C4 counties migration. There's a two-step process on this. As I talked about before, in April, we reviewed the overall CalACES criteria, performance against the SLAs, and talked through the next steps. Now we are going through the results of April, the final results, and evaluating, and just as an update, providing the board an update on where we are with our discussions with John. So just as a refresher, approval of the CalSAWS migration final acceptance leads to the consortium's payment of the first holdback release for the CalSAWS DD&I project. There will be another holdback release requested at the end of CalWIN conversions after the October timeframe. If we can move on to the next one. Yes, go ahead, Dan.
On that slide, this is Dan Dean with the Quality Assurance Team. What we wanted to add here was the due diligence performed on the requirements. Just providing some color. It's more than a spreadsheet. We have a database which tracks all these requirements, working through across all the teams. And those requirements live through the life cycle from design through test until they're deployed to production. So we have confirmed that this 441 have been deployed, along with the proper artifacts have been attached. There is a balance of approximately 180 requirements that are part of the next phase, which will be the CalWIN final acceptance, that include things like GAGR, additional conversion, call center, those types of things. Thanks, Arnold.
Thank you, Dan. If we move on to the next slide, this provides a summary of the official SLAs and performance requirements for the CalSAWS system. And as you can see, we met all but 3, and I'll be spending the next couple slides going into more of the detail on those 3 areas that we missed. Dan, do you want to give commentary on the QA check marks?
Yeah, the final column here is where quality assurance has gone in and confirmed that those activities are either met, where you see the gold seal, or we agree with the status reported. So you do see 3 reds here. Arnold will be describing them in further details. 12 and 15 are single-day anomalies, 4 specific to the help desk and activities associated with EDBC and help requests, understanding how the application works.
Thank you, Dan. If we can move on to the next slide. So as Dan mentioned, there were 3 areas that we were unable to meet the SLA across all the months. Number 1 was around number 12, and that was the one day where we had 4 transactions out of 52 that did not meet the overall response time of less than 5 seconds. These transactions occurred on a Saturday night in the middle of batch running. One of them had to do with a 3-month look back on an EDBC run. In addition, the team is looking at the root cause around for the other 3 EDBCs that ran between 5 and 6 seconds. So that's the eligibility calculation. Looking to see if there's other sorts of tuning that can be done to address those. We don't normally see those during the course of business during prime time because batch isn't running, number 1. And then also, these transactions weren't just 1 month, they were more complex, which typically takes longer. The second area, and this is the area that we'll spend a lot of the time talking about, is on the monthly help desk diagnosis time, where the target's 98%, we're at 72%. That actually represents a drop from last month due to the fact that we're clearing out the backlog. So there are more tickets that are sitting in our backlog that have exceeded the SLA. And so as we close those out, those will impact the SLA. The good news is we have gone through a lot of the backlog, and so we will see that number start ticking back up with our May results. And I'll speak more to the actions that we're taking there. And then the last one is number 15, and that's the performance of the training environment and the availability. Last month, I had reported that we had already had the 1 miss in April because we had an issue with our restart scripts on the environment. That remained our only miss during the course of the month. Another point there, and I know Gilbert had asked for this, around giving some additional input as to if their training environment was having a degradation of functionality, such as the copy function, would that impact this SLA? The answer is in the calculation, no, but what we will do going forward is we will put some footnotes on those that would indicate if we do have a service degradation associated with that training environment. Because right now, this SLA is calculated as being time up. actual system time up. We move on to the next slide, please. So as we look closer at the total tickets closed, we are looking at the overall trends around what is driving our volume. And so if we looked at April, it was consistent with what we saw in March, which is roughly 50% of the tickets that are coming through are questions on how does the system work, it wasn't a system error, or it requires some further explanation rather than the system defects. If we looked at the breakdown in applications, we have a positive trend here with imaging, which I think is a direct result of the work that was done to resolve those defects, to where only 12% of the tickets in April were associated with imaging, 64% were with the CalSAWS application. The balance were with the other ancillary systems, whether it was infrastructure or the call centers or contact centers. Functionality. We move to the next slide, please. Clicking further down, we then get into tickets that miss the SLA. And again, in April, we saw 914 tickets that missed. Roughly 43% of those that missed the SLA were associated with that first category I talked about on the previous slide. It was the how-to and explanation versus defects. Then if we looked at the core area within the functionality where we were seeing the bulk of the questions coming in, 41% of them had to deal with the eligibility calculations. And so what that's really pointing to is the fact that that is one of the more robust areas of the system that has more complex functionality. And those tickets actually take longer for us to resolve due to the fact that in a lot of cases, we're going through a manual recalculation of what that eligibility was to either confirm that things were operating correctly or to provide an explanation to the requester as to what occurred with it. We move to the next slide, please. This slide is really talking about, and this is the number of tickets that are actually in the backlog that have missed the SLA target. And what we saw is from March to April, we did see a decrease. We actually have a much steeper decline trending in May. However, since we didn't have the full month of material, we cut it off in April. So what this is really telling us is this is our forecast of the more we see that have breached the SLA that have yet to be resolved, that'll have an impact on our SLA because as we resolve those, they will count against the breach as well. So we're seeing a decline in May. That'll also translate to an improvement of that SLA metric in the May and June, July timeframe as we continue to work through that backlog. We move to the next slide. So really what we're focusing on the goals, going back to the trend where we had the 50% of the tickets really getting into system functionality, it's pointing towards a need for enhanced communication so that we can get better explanations or get the necessary training out to the submitters, the caseworkers in the county, so that there are fewer questions that come through. And so the best ticket is one that never gets opened. And the way that occurred through better education as well as addressing any system defects that could be contributing to that. So really focusing on coming back to the trends that we're seeing and the questions coming to us through those tickets, putting together the enhanced communications as well as potentially enhancing the training to include other vignettes around the specific points where we're seeing high numbers of questions come in. We're also looking at further empowering the help desk at the county level as well as at the project level with incremental information so that that will be the first stop to see if we can get these questions answered there. Because the other thing that we notice is that the more handoffs that occur with the tickets, it translates to a longer response time and time to closure. So the more we can reduce the numbers or the number of times the ticket changes hands, the better off we'll be. And then the third component means that will allow the project staff to focus on fixing the defects. They're still available to answer questions from the service desk or for the end users, but what we are going to be doing is really focusing on that education so we can push the information out to the caseworkers who need it, answer their questions, and that way it'll reduce the questions that have to come through to the support organizations. We move on to the next slide, please.
And Arnold, I think on some of these items, we're going to have to probably ratchet up because we have a bunch of items, and then see if there's specific questions that our board members have, and then we can go back to the details necessary to address the questions, but we're going to have to ratchet up just a little bit.
Yes, so on this slide, this is hitting the key areas of extended communication that'll help cut the flow as well. At this point, Dan, I'll let you chime in as well from a QA perspective on some of the enhanced communications.
Yeah, Gretchen is facilitating this from a QA perspective. I think June is on to add a little color. June, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. So I think one of the things, and just to keep it brief, one of the things we want the counties to know is that we're looking at this from a project-wide perspective. Your regional managers are having a monthly meeting with the help desk team so that they can look at where these trends are coming from, where these how-to questions are coming from, and how can we better respond? Can we provide some additional training? Can we, have some extra communications that go out to the counties through CITs, et cetera, so that we can address those things? Because, as it was stated, the best thing is for us to avoid a ticket that is a how-to right off the bat, so that it doesn't even get to the help desk. So we are working on that, and that is included in the communications strike team. And we're adding a section to the CalSAWS Buzz newsletter that will be notes from the help desk or tech tips, that we will also use that to address some of these issues that maybe we just need to communicate out to the counties a little bit better on how a particular item works. So we're working on that, and we're really looking forward to the communications focus group that's coming up later in the month of May to hear directly from your staff how we can help. Thank you.
Thank you, June. If we can move on to the next slide, I'll pass over this one quickly. Already talked through the EDVC calculation, the 4 that didn't meet the SLA, and the actions that we're taking. Next slide, on slide 41, is again talking about the training environments where we had the script that failed to restart the environment, and the enhanced monitoring that we're doing there to keep that from happening again, and we've had no reoccurrences to that. We move on to next slide, please. So if we look at what our next steps are, one is to request Consortium Executive Director's discretion for approving the CalACE's final acceptance. In parallel to that, we are going to continue to work on the action plans and M&O improvements to address the missed SLAs, continue to enhance the training materials, focus on the reduced diagnosis time so we can improve our responsiveness to the users, create our automated alerts on the training database, and then provide ongoing help or updates to the board on progress made on the action items. Dan, is there anything you'd like to contribute from a QA perspective?
No, we'll cover it on the next slide. Thanks, Arnold.
All right, let's move on to the next slide, and with Dan, I'll turn it over.
Yeah, so this is tying back the terms of final acceptance to the requirement listed, PID 1983. And we expect to lift the little yellow qualifier here, pending final deliverable, this month. The FDEL, the final deliverable, was submitted on Monday of this week. We had a meeting earlier this morning and worked through the areas, about a half a dozen, where we had suggestions, and most of them had already been actioned. On the first 2 open bullets there, summary lessons learned and recommendations for improvement, that document became all-inclusive of everything since go live, which is good. It gives us one place to look for CalWIN go live for best practices. And then The receipt of certification letter has been updated to include the 3 areas where an exception is sought specific to the SLAs that Arnold described on the earlier slides. The other areas have been checked, as I said at the very beginning, related to the requirements traceability matrix and confirming those numbers. So, give a summary on this.
Thank you, Dan. If we can move on to, we'll skip 2 slides forward. So there were also some informational items that we provided an update with back in our last month, and we provided an update on the imaging project. We're also going to be having a special topic later on in the agenda today, talking about reports, because we understand the friction that is occurring and the problems the counties are having, so we have specific thoughts on actions that we'll take to remediate those. And then the last component is just a brief overview around an accessibility overview. And that is, we brought in a third party to, if we could advance to the next slide, please. We brought in a third party to perform an accessibility assessment for the core CalSAWS application on overall usability. It's currently in progress. We focused on 40 of the high volume pages that represent over 60% of all the system transactions. Global components are included, including the calendar icon and widget, the headers, the navigation functions as well. And it was performed against the Chrome browser, the Edge browser. Automated and manual testing occurred, and then screen reader and keyboard only navigation testing was part of the scope of that as well, to test overall accessibility and usability. We move on to slide 47. Next slide, and it's just from a status and a next steps perspective. We had a number of findings that came out of that initial first phase. 39 of those are awaiting testing. 4 items, which are too critical, too serious, are pending the analysis and resolution. All 4 items are associated with the calendar picker functionality. It's a global element spread across multiple screens. The next phase as well will be complete the plan for phase 2 of testing, which is the rest of the pages to cover over 80% of the transactions. So we're targeting completion of that by October 30th. With that, I'll turn it back over to Michael for any questions.
Okay, Arnold, I appreciate that real detailed dive, as John stated. I think I'll open it up to quick questions or comments. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move forward. So directors, state partners, any comments, questions on this presentation? Okay, any public comment on this? Okay, then we'll go ahead and move forward. We're going to try to catch up as best we can.
All right, so now we will start moving over into our review of the high and medium risks for the project. We'll start out with risk 258, which is associated with the Calvin conversion window at risk of completing the within the 84 hours. Where we are with this is the team has completed tabletop exercise and calculating out what the expected time will be. We will have confirmation of that with the first mock conversion. At this point in time, we are not forecasting a slippage outside of the window. Dan, do you want?
Yeah, on this one, QA is focused on also making sure we're accounting for the growing caseloads, as well as the additional transformation of data required by CalWin. That transformation was not part of the C4 process. So that's another area where we're dialed in with the teams to look at.
If we can move on to the next slide, please. Risk 262, we'll have Rachel or Shrestha talk through that.
Hey there, this is Catherine Van Eman. I'll be filling in for Rachel for risk 262. This risk is in regards to the Calhoun counties having sufficient information for go live and the preparation activities. A couple of things just to update the group on from a mitigation plan and status. We have continued to refine the work plan and the checklist items for waves 1 through 3. At this point in time, it is a T-12 activity. We also have enhanced the quality assurance processes that we are going through for those weekly updates. The next point of status for RIS 262 is around the green light governance. We have established this governance structure, this model, taking into account the updates and the retrospectives from C4 and applying that information to the CalWIN migration process. We will be talking further in this meeting about what that would look like for wave 1 in this meeting agenda. The next is in regards to the implementation readiness dashboard and packet, which we are on schedule at this point to deliver. We are working again across the project with the counties to also highlight the readiness metrics from a project, as well as most importantly from the county perspective. Lastly, we are also reviewing a lot of the resources that will be available right now from a targeted on-site support, as well as surrounding and supporting the Wave 1 counties to make sure that information from both the SME, the project, as well as additional support is available and ready to assist them in all areas of the project. And with that, I will turn it back over to Abby or to, I believe, Michael.
Thanks, Catherine. Just a quick update from QA. So for RIS 262 on the green light governance, as Catherine had mentioned, we are going to be providing an overview on the governance model and meetings for wave 1. QA has been providing guidance on the green light governance on the model and the structure, and also on the implementation readiness dashboard and packet. So those are the things that we wanted to add from a QA perspective. Thank you.
So moving on to 263, which is the CDT. If we could back one slide up, please. This is unresolved high priority conversion defects not resolved prior to wave 1 go live. The key here is with the conversion process. Any new P1s are being targeted for the next golden data set. If they're unable to meet that golden data set, then they will be included as point fixes within the conversion environment. So we are continuing to work closely with QA as well as the team as the defects are identified to determine the dispositioning.
Yeah, so the teams are collaborating daily on this activity. The resolution of CDT defects does impact UAT since we're using converted data. And we also have a weekly Thursday escalation meeting specifically focused on the priority 1s and 2s. As of last look, there was one P1 out there that's targeted for a hot fix. And then we're looking at GDS 8, which is due June 20th, and how that impacts our go live. So far we're trending well, but this is one of those things that where the status changes daily since there's a lot of activity going on.
Thank you, Dan. Let's move on to the next slide. RIS 267 has to do with GAGR functionality and county validation, may be delayed past May of 2022. There is a new requirement with time clock that has been identified. It is currently scheduled to be implemented with 2207, which will be in time for the 18 county UAT on July 25th. Other functionality remains on track for delivery. Dan, if you want to.
Yeah, so Arnold covered everything leading up to the 43 county UAT. Also, because wave 2 through 6 counties, their data would be coming over later. There has been a county data validation or CDV step added for each of waves 2 through 6, which will come with those associated waves.
Catherine, I'll let you talk to 268.
Perfect, thank you. 268 is the overall umbrella for the implementation readiness activities for CalWIN. We're going to be speaking a little bit more about this in the other risk mitigation and contingency areas that Wendy will cover. So I think that being said, we'll continue to cover more of the details within each one of the mitigation associated risks that are listed on the screen.
Topic 15, so we can just defer it to then.
All right, so then we can proceed on to the next slide, 269. Catherine.
Perfect. So 269 is regarding the ad hoc reporting and the development and testing timeframe. There have been a number of updates regarding Wave 1 counties. There is a very robust education sessions that have been scheduled at this point for Wave 1. We are already, the team is already at 80% completion of those education sessions and working to also provide access to data for counties across Waves 1 through 6 to be able to start to refactor and test that data. In addition, Waves 2 through 3 have already begun those education sessions, and Waves 4 and 5 are already, and 6 actually are already scheduled that will begin over the next 30 to 60 days as well.
All right, let's move on to 270 while you're at it.
I'm actually going to have Suresh join us and talk about 270.
Okay, thank you.
70 relates to change discussion counties. So we are in the process of finalizing the Wave 1 change discussion guides at this moment. The OCM team reviewed comments as part of the DDEL submission, addressed the comments submitted after DDEL, and are in the process of closing those out right now. We are estimating to deliver Wave 1 CDGs by the 16th, and the team's on track.
Shrestha, this is Abby Dare from the QA perspective. I just wanted to add also for the draft deliverable that was submitted and subsequently the final deliverable that was submitted, 82% of the total draft deliverable comments were resolved in the final, which was great. The team did a really great job in addressing all of the deliverable reviewer comments. 18% were not resolved, and the organizational change management team met with the deliverable reviewers this week to resolve those comments, and they're working to address them. 125 new final deliverable review comments were submitted, and those are expected to be resolved as well.
Thank you, Abby. We move on to the next slide. We'll then transition in our medium risks, and I will talk through 236 and 237 together because it talks about scaling of the analytics dashboards for the 58 counties, as well as scaling for batch for the 58 counties.
Hey, Arnold, what I'm thinking is we did just go through all of the high risks. I think for scaling that we've had conversations, seems like we're starting to get a handle on our technical scaling and how we're doing those items. It seems like those risks are trending down. Many of them are mediums. We know some of our user readiness risks have trended up a bit, and we just went up on those. Is there any just high-level items? I think there's a lot of documentation here for the public record, but I don't know if we need to go through at this point in time all of our medium risks one by one. Is there anything that you want to point out that you would like to highlight for our board?
I think the key is that we are seeing the batch schedule complete earlier on the daily basis, which was related to the green metrics that we saw. The team is continuing to look for those opportunities, as well as we're starting the batch regression, as well as the batch performance testing for the Calhoun County. So it's an ongoing effort. The team is continuing to look for other improvement ideas on both the batch and the analytics to continue to move those back so we have consistent performance.
And one of the things that it may impact and that directors may hear is we're going to really start to hone in that batch when we're looking at 58 counties and dependencies in batch and when we receive files from the county and those dependencies and windows for those things that could delay items. So as we expand our batch process, we're really going to have to get precise, and that is going to impact the counties on being very timely on those things. And we'll bring those back to PSC or JPA if we need that, but we know that that's a challenging conversation, especially when we're looking at other controller files and those types of things, because our window's getting smaller and smaller, and the dependencies getting bigger and bigger as we expand our batch. So those are some things that you could probably expect that we're going to be bringing to PSC and probably exposed to the JPA as we go forward.
That's correct, and especially on the deep dive topic around the reporting, when we look at some of those dependencies and the timing and the ability to, or the need to have to rerun reports if we miss a file or something along those lines.
Because we've gotten a lot on batch that says, okay, your batch is trending down, but how come there's a dependency on my reports? All my reports aren't ready in the morning. And it wasn't because the batch ran over, it's because we had a dependency on a file and we had to make sure that we finished issuance and we got files late. So we waited for that late issuance file because benefits are more important than reports and working on that. But we're going to have to keep cranking that down and get more and more specific on those items.
Correct. And then on the last component, that's around imaging. So, and the last slide is also around imaging, and that is the risk has reduced from a perspective of performance. When we were doing the performance testing for Los Angeles County, we actually ran 58 county loads through it, so we have confidence that the solution will scale for the rest of the Calhoun counties. We're also harvesting the lessons learned, and in the June conference, we'll be having a breakout session for imaging, so we'll be sharing these best practices for the Calhoun counties and those tips and tricks on how to prepare for the conversion, how to mock and map the forms to CalSAWS, which then makes the conversion that much easier. So these risks are trending positive as well. And that, Dan, is there anything you wanted to contribute from a QA perspective?
I think just closing out the imaging topic, the site visits are top of mind where there's a lot of value add that involves both Consortium, QA, and Accenture. So you said you were in Napa today, and we're happy to engage, go forward with seeing it firsthand and sharing best practices.
That wraps up the risks, and we can transition back to Michael for any questions.
Gilbert has his hand up.
Thanks, Michael. Just a quick question. This kind of goes to my earlier comments about staffing shortages, if you will, and availability of human resources. Is the projects experiencing this trend at all? And is that categorized at any level of a risk at this point? Or are any staff shortages that we are experiencing at the project just kind of blended into the existing other risks because without staff, that it's going to complicate that risk? Just curious on that, how the project's doing with staffing.
Gilbert, you can see when Holly gave the update that there was some underspending in staff because of vacancy savings. I would say overall we are doing well from a consortium standpoint, and that our vendor staff have been doing well. I think some of the coding resources and the expansion to be able to bring things offshore has helped us out in that regard. But I would be remiss if said we got it covered. It's a tight labor market, and I think all of us are being very competitive, even sometimes with one another, to make sure that we fill our teams, and recruitment's hot and heavy. I think we're making do on that, and we're trying to be a employer of first choice as we go out there and sort of recruit amongst the various folks. There's people that do want to come to work at CalSAWS. We thank the counties for your support of the project. We know that some people have left the county and actually come to RGS for that. So I think, Gilbert, the short answer is we're getting by. The labor market's tight. We're getting by on that, and I think we're doing everything we can to mitigate that turning into a risk, and we're not using that as an excuse for not delivering.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was really nice to see the risk 256 go green. I mean, I think we were red at one point, so I'm really pleased.
Let out a sigh of relief on that one.
Yeah, that was scared the heck out of me. Okay, on the other risk areas that are surrounding county readiness, like 262, 268, 270, kind of have a focus, I think, based on that earlier conversation with the directors about resources available, what counties are actually doing with those resources, templates you're going to put together on what kind of teams they need to establish, because we know, I think it was alluded to, that this is going to be a kind of a major change for Calwin, just like it was when LA first moved over to the system. So how surrounded with support they are on the ground, how much they're ready going in, how much reduction we can have in yellow flag cases, so that they're not having to work as many manual cases. Those are going to be huge impacts, positively or negatively. So.
Yeah, Michael, I absolutely concur. I think the transparency is going to be coming through that green light process to the board. You're going to see those statistics. And I think the counties are not going to feel that in the aggregate, but they're going to start feeling that in waves. We know that we're going to be meeting with Yolo County next week as a management team, making sure that we're working through their specific items, issues, those types of things on how they're organizing and working with them on their concerns. Placer County, I believe it's a week or so after that. You know, we had an initial meeting with Marla and her team, but we're going to be having another meeting with each one of the Wave 2 counties. So I think the counties are going to start feeling that, seeing the clarity and feeling the support in waves, and then the transparency to the board and the project steering committee are going to be coming through the go live metrics as we come through there. So we'll start to see those items as well.
Great, thanks, John. And I just want to make sure if we aren't checking certain things that are related to that earlier discussion in the readiness, that we add those elements into the future reports.
Very good.
Okay, any other comments, questions from our directors or state partners on this presentation area?
Now that we're,
Oh, wow. There goes one.
Marla had a quick question.
I can't see the hand, remember?
yeah, no, that's fine. I know that we're short of time. I just wanted to say, John, that I think that the visits you're doing to counties are much appreciated and really help counties to feel heard and feel personally assisted. So I think that's worth the investment, and I appreciate it.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on that presentation? Okay, then we'll go ahead and we'll jump to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, this is CalSAWS. The reports and claiming topic was brought last month to the board. We wanted to bring it back to this discussion to provide some updates on what we're continuing to do, as well as refinements to the process respectively. So as we had mentioned last month, we're continuing on with our bi-weekly state and fiscal report meeting. So every other week, we're reviewing with the teams. We're reviewing recent and upcoming changes, any defects that are open, any defects that are going into the system and when, as well as listening to the counties and making sure that we're there to listen and address their questions and concerns. We are, and as we requested, and they're continuing to do so, we're continuing to get tickets, and we're continuing to address and resolve those tickets in a timely fashion. We're also, and we did this just the other day, we've also provided an enhanced communication. We are going to refine that process. We initially indicated that we thought we would only need to do this one time, given that we do have meeting minutes that come out of the bi-weekly meeting. But what I think we found is that enhanced communication, there's a lot of good detail in there with some executive level summary that we think will be very insightful for those that are gathering that. So we did send out the enhanced communication earlier this week. And what we will do is we'll continue to do so. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as
Keith, before we go on that,
sure.
You said the word that we will continue to do that as if it was adequate. And I've heard a lot from the counties as well as our regional managers as of late that they don't want us to continue what we're doing. They want us to improve what we're doing, to be able to get additional information in. So I know we're running short on time, but I don't want the silence to be read as what we're doing is adequate. And I know the team has pivoted to be able to say, how are we filling that gap on information, tickets, timeliness, because on the 800 reports specifically and daily reconciliations to be able to submit the reports timely, and the amount of work it's taking the counties to be able to reconcile and re-reconcile those things as they look at daily reports and monthly reports, it's having an impact. And we had a long conversation on resources earlier, and that was one of the resources burns that the counties have brought up. So I think I want to focus us on what are we doing to, those might have not been tickets, we're just sort of looking at that. What is our pivot to begin to start to fill that gap that our regional managers are hearing and that I'm hearing specifically on those items, because it is delaying their reports, and unfortunately the counties now have a shorter period in order to support their 800 reports because of a state implementation of CCRIS and the timeframes associated with that. That's putting additional pressure on that. So I don't want to just go through and say we're going to continue to do things. I think we have to ramp up what we're doing to better meet, I think, the demands that are on our counties.
Fair enough. So two things, John. Number one, deploy the defects that are identified that are impacting the county's ability to submit state reports. Tonight, we will have two defects that are going to go in that will update the that'll resolve the integrated report problems that we saw earlier this week and late last week, respectively. Those are going in tonight. We will be regenerating the reports for the counties that are impacted. We had a really good discussion this morning to talk about refinements to the process. And although we'll continue to support the counties in the biweekly meetings, some of the improvements that we have identified is to the operations. And so what we're going to start to look into is when we recognize that we have files that did not make it in time for the batch to run, and then that impacts the ability for the counties to get their reports or get their reports updated with the information that's needed on there, that as soon as we have that information, we send a communication out to the counties informing them that we did not receive your file, blah, blah, blah. And when we do receive your file, we will regenerate the report, and then we'll also send out another communication letting them know that when we do generate reports, these are the reports that we generated and when they will be available. Because the one thing that we absolutely heard, and we've had two meetings since yesterday. We had our biweekly meeting just yesterday, as well as a refinement discussion that we had this morning. And what we really heard was we want proactive communication to go to the counties. The counties don't want to be in the midst of reviewing their reports when they find errors, and then that impacts their ability to continue on. You want to hear from the project as soon as we know. So we've got a meeting scheduled, I believe, early next week to talk about refinements to our operations process, so that when we identify those concerns in our batch processing, we're able to provide communication early, and then provide them up.
And Keith, just sort of reading, I guess, the room a bit and where we're at. I think where what I've heard and what I've heard from directors and things is that's good. They want to see results, and that the details right now probably aren't as important as having us pivot and start to provide some results, some clear communications, and get those out. So I don't know if we need to go into the details at this point in time, other than continuing to drill down with the regional managers, the reports teams, and having those enhanced communications that are flowing and probably clear throughput. And we probably need to also be pushing in with our state partners and knowing where those defects are impacting, or those workarounds, or whatever it may be, are impacting the county's ability to submit, and being clear on those things in support of our counties.
John, the action plan is going to be, we're getting the list of all the counties, and we're going through and understanding who's having what issue. That way we can correlate and see if there's a system defect or if there is a common solution to all of them. So we're going through the defects, we're gathering that input, we're going to lean in with the reporting team to work through with the counties on that to really identify where the rub points are. And if it's a system issue, identify it, get it prioritized and taken care of. If it's an interpretation issue, get alignment on that interpretation and share the results out with all the counties. And that way we can meet it from both increasing the system functionality and viability as well as from a knowledge perspective to make progress against this. And as the communication, as Keith communicated around the enhanced communication, doing much like we did with the imaging, which is here are the list of known defects, here's the estimated fixed dates, any sort of workarounds around it, and including that in the enhanced communication as well. So we're looking to attack this from multiple angles to help reduce the pain that the counties are feeling.
And as I mentioned before, I think the imaging, enhanced communication sort of raised the bar on that. And I think the expectations of going through that complex imaging items and coming to a positive resolution is, I think we've talked about that, and I think the counties are talking about that and expecting that we raise the game in the reports area to sort of mirror some of those things that have positively been experienced on imaging.
Yes.
And that is in fact what we are doing, John. We already have we're putting together a draft version of the enhanced communication. Clearly, we sent one out last week. It was in line with the imaging. It was basically a template of what the imaging used. We're further enhancing that will go out on a weekly basis starting next week. And so we'll continue on submitting that to the counties on a weekly basis. And you'll start to see results immediately. We'll have the defects going tonight. We will communicate to the counties that the defect went in and the reports are generated and available for them. We're planning to have those available over the weekend.
Very good. Anything else that you want to summarize, Keith, before we sort of click through and go to the next topic?
No, John, I think we've hit it.
Okay, Michael, back to you on that.
Okay, thank you, John. Thanks, Keith, for that. Any comments or questions from the rest of our board members or state partners on that item related to claiming and reports?
Appreciate your attention to this. I'm very concerned about this. Our ability to claim our funding is so important. And I mean, I feel like I talk about this all the time, so I don't want to be above the record. I do appreciate you listening, but the word report, I said this before, it just doesn't really reflect what's happening here for us. Report kind of reflects something that happened in the past and you want to learn from it. For us, these reports are taking us forward. Like, we don't know what work to do today. If we don't get the right things, we can't claim for our money. So we appreciate your attention here and just do want to really make sure that it continues to be a very high priority. I am concerned that C4 counties are still struggling here. We're a bit out from their go live.
And Marla, I think, you know, what I've heard is the issue and the true concern coming from directors isn't on a management or a statistical report. It's really on the CA 800 claiming reports and the ability to reconcile those reports for submission. And when dailies and monthlies don't reconcile, then there's manual work to go in and have to say which one is the true number. And that's what's leaving the counties in the lurch. So that's where we have to get to on that. So to just put a specific point on your point is it's really those fiscal claiming reports that result in money and reimbursement for the counties.
And if I can just add, I really appreciate that you have heard, I mean, very much as Marla said, around what our needs are as far as communication. When we talk about enhanced communication, and I first heard that, and I was like, great, and you're right, you set the bar on imaging and did a phenomenal job with it, and so that's really what we had expected. And, you know, getting meeting notes and those kinds of things was not at the same level. And so I appreciate that you're shifting that and making that pivot, because very much it's challenging. I mean, we're talking about 15 reports that they're trying to put together and reconcile that are wonky at this point. We'll just use a nice technical term, right? That, are driving our funding. And so it's critical for us. And then with the shortened timeline and the CCRIS push as well, it's just complex, and it's adding to it, and it's compounding all of the challenges that our staff on the ground are facing. And I can only imagine in those counties that are, looking at coming into this and what apprehension it may cause. And I really do want this to be a really smooth transition all the way around. I think that it's been a phenomenal partnership. It continues to be, and we'll work through this, and I know that, but it's certainly a huge challenge and a huge issue for our counties. So thank you.
Yeah, so we're committed to really lean in and let's get this solved.
Okay, thank you. Any other director comments or state partner comments? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment on that? Okay, then we're going to go ahead and roll along to the next one, and I believe that's our first discussion on the quarterly offshore quality review. Lulu.
Yes, hi directors. So at the last March JPA board meeting, the directors did approve the expansion of the Accenture Global Delivery Network offshore staffing mix to 40%. One of the items that the board wanted to do was continue to monitor how the quality of our delivery is with the expansion of our offshore staff. So what we want to propose to all of you today was to share with you the schedule that we like to follow in terms of providing you a quarterly update 4 times a year. So in general, what I like to do is share with you, for example, for a 2205 release that will get deployed in May, when that deployment is completed, any defect related to that deployment would occur and be implemented by the next major release. That would be 2207. Obviously, if there are high priority releases, we will have priority release that will get that one in probably in June. But in general, the fixes will come into 2207. So what we're proposing is that in the July JPA board meeting, we will be coming back to you and sharing with you the quality metrics related to the 2205 deployment. So this is going to be following a very similar pattern, and the proposed schedule that we have would be come back to report in October, February, and July, and we will be doing this on an annual basis. And then every time we come back, we will be able to share with you how our metrics look against some of the major release deployments. And that is our short update for today. And if you are okay with this schedule, we're going to be back in July with the quality metrics.
I don't necessarily have an issue with the schedule itself. I just wanted to run by John. Do we always have a July board meeting?
There was a time where things weren't as busy, where we could skip a July meeting. That hasn't happened probably for about the last 3 years.
Okay.
3 or 4 years. So, Michael,
I just didn't want to target something.
We'll schedule around that annual vacation that I know that you have in July, and we'll get it taken care of.
Hey, you outed me.
Michael, I called in from Hawaii once.
It's my Zen time up at Bass Lake and at Yosemite. Okay. All right. Well, I think this looks good. I think it'll give us a good snapshot throughout the year. We pick it up in February, we hit the middle of the year and towards the end of the year. So we'll know where we're at each year. I do want to open it up if anybody else has any comments, or directors or state partners on this. Okay, this is important for us to keep an eye on. We want to make sure that this is, meeting all of our quality standards.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Lulu. Appreciate your attention.
Of course.
Oh, any public comment on that? Nope. All right, next item.
All right, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Catherine Van Amen on behalf of the ISS team. Just going to prepare and provide a little bit of an update regarding where we are with the Wave 1 county readiness, specifically around system, technical, and then our organizational readiness activities. So first, we're going to go ahead and start with system. There are a few great activities that are occurring right now. Right now, we're actually focused on UAT preparation. These activities began a couple of weeks ago and will go for over the next month, about 5-week span before UAT execution kicks off. The next item that we did want to highlight is the ongoing data cleansing opportunities. Right now, there are about 3 different, what we refer to as the case review guides, that are out and published. However, there are a few other priorities that the counties have, specifically around section codes and then some other data cleansing opportunities. These 2 lists, we are producing, in the process of producing some case review guides with screenshots that the counties will then be able to account for while they're doing those data cleansing opportunities in CalWIN. And those are going to be forthcoming as a result of some very specific asks from the counties. So we are accommodating that in the next week and a half. So more to come on that as well. Imaging continues to be an ongoing activity for the Wave 1 counties. And then another milestone, which actually happens today, is really around from contact center to have all of the IVR call flows approved and submitted to the project. So today live, so far we are good to go on that, and that milestone has been achieved. Going back to a little bit more around RIS 269, as well as some of the information that Keith and his team have been working on, we are starting to look and discuss with the counties what reports are going to be prioritized for refactoring before the Wave 1 go live date of 10/31. So a lot of when we're going to start talking a little bit more in subsequent months regarding the progress and what additional support the counties need in terms of having those reports refactored by the end of the month. And if we can continue one slide, we'll touch on a few items specific for the technical readiness. Very exciting. A lot of work has been initiated in April, and we are carrying that forward for the help desk and the county site plans. So the team has been working with the counties and their technical folks to start to document a lot of those processes, as well as what those site plans will look like. There have also been a few curfews and a lot of collaboration between the technical team and the TPOCs at the counties. There have been a few curfews requesting additional information, as well as working on really focusing on what additional application or business requirements are needed, and what are some of those SFTP server details. So a lot of those ongoing conversations are happening, and they will continue through, I would say, mid to late June for more information. And then lastly, we do want to highlight a few of the items on the next slide regarding the organizational readiness for Wave 1. A few things just to highlight. Very exciting. In the next few weeks, we will have all of the Wave 1 curriculum actually reviewed by the TAC members, ready to go as we are preparing for the LMS and loading all of the users for access to the LMS, where they will register and take their WBTs later in the summer. So a lot of great traction and collaboration that the team has had through the TAC members, specifically on curriculum development for all of the instructor-led training. And one of my personal favorites is definitely the learning journey map, where all end users in the counties will be able to access their personalized learning journey and begin their WBTs and their experiences in CalSAWS. The other item to highlight is we actually did have a change or a shift in some of the areas regarding configuration definition and some of the staffing that would be associated with that. So with Wave 1, specifically at YOLO and Placer, those meetings have actually been scheduled for later this month, and those activities will carry forward into the June timeframe. So the next time you see this slide, that information, those bars, those purple bars will actually have been shifted a little bit to the right. Also, to highlight a few updates more regarding from a organizational change management perspective. We do have a milestone for the approval of those change discussion guides. Abby and Sareshta gave that update regarding risk number 270. And so those will be closed out in the next few weeks as well, once all of those comments have been addressed. And then lastly, the individual county training plans have been submitted. And again, really looking forward to starting that learning journey map, as well as the experiences for your staff in the system. So I will pause there, Michael, and turn it back to you to see if there are any questions.
Any questions or comments from our director of state partners on this item? Okay, any public comment on this? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you very much to our presenter.
All right, thank you, Michael. I'm not going to drain this slide. I know we're short for time here. Suffice to say, we're going to focus the discussion here on converted data test and essentially the yellow banner cases. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. So what this slide really represents, and it's a slide that we look at, I think Dan had mentioned it earlier, that every week we're looking at our CDT results, and the conversion team wants to make sure that we can resolve all of our high priority defects prior to CDT closure or go live. And so our current target right now is we're planning to get all of our priority 1 defects into GDS 8, which is going to be our very next delivery of converted data. A GDS represents a converted data set. We call it a golden data set, but the acronym is GDS. That GDS will be used for our county data validation, and we're on a good path right now to getting all of those into that golden data set. And then we'll be looking at golden data set number 9, which is a bit of a hybrid for us. Golden data set number 9 is starting to be our transition into wave 2. However, it has the wave 1 data set in there as well. So we'll look to leverage that data set as we deliver that and that will be towards the end of summer. If we go to the next slide, this one really represents where we're at with CDT, and then as we progress through UAT. And so the blue line represents what our plan is in terms of the total number of defects that we currently had as of end of March, and what our projections were as we executed through CDT through the end of May, and then as we progress through UAT through the summer. And right now the green line is showing us our actuals, which is below the plan, which is good. Below the plan means we're ahead of schedule, and that's where we want to be. And we'll continue to track this with the project respectively. If we go to the next slide, this is a slide, and I believe we presented this maybe the last month. This is the slide that takes the yellow banners off of the cases respectively, and our target is 70 to 75%. We are making incremental movements upwards towards the 70. Right now, we are about 58% on the golden data set that we delivered to UAT, and that was number 7. And in our lower environments right now, we're seeing gains that take us into the mid 60s, or around 63, 64% with the targeted changes in that environment. And so we've been testing those out this week. And so we continue to identify these opportunities where we can increase our match rate. And by increasing the match rate, when we do this during the conversion, it then removes the banner from the case, which then removes the need for caseworkers to review that case respectively. And Michael, I believe that's it. So I'll pause and send it back to you.
So Keith, is there anything that the counties can do to help with some of these cases, or is that still preliminary at this point?
Well, there's not a whole lot they can do. This is a it's an activity that's executed during conversion, and the data is always moving as we lead up to conversion. And so we do that assessment during the conversion. What we've identified is for the the case review, the auto case review, keeping the cases up to date and running an keeping them up to date, running an EDBC on them, leading up to conversion. Those things will help. Making sure the verifications are up to date. Those things will help. However, we haven't seen any major gains that if you do this, then it'll increase the match rate by blah. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that the counties could do in preparation for this. We do have, yes.
There are some reports being run out of CalWIN, specifically some associated with like the address field, things that impact EDBC, that reports are being run out of CalWIN to be able to close those gaps and aid in the missing data field. So I know from your perspective as it comes over what we're looking at in CalSAWS, but I know that Gainwell and CalWIN are producing reports and tracking on some of those items that are going to aid in, I think, a better items coming out. So I would say probably what you're saying is make sure you're up on your case processing, no pending cases, those types of things, but there's also specific reports coming from CalWIN on that. And Diane just popped in the chat saying yes, and I know that her and I talked this morning about maybe getting some specifics, bringing the regional managers into that so they can see some of the tracking for each one of the CalWIN counties, how they're progressing on those reports. That will aid in that and hopefully help reduce those yellow banner pages.
That's great, John. I'm glad to hear that, because I can't overemphasize the importance of really trying to get the banner cases shrunk as much as possible, and whatever can be done on the county's end or the project's end to do that will be worth it. Okay, any other comments or questions from our board members or our state partners on that presentation? Thank you, Keith. Okay, hearing none. Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move right along to the next item.
I'm going to hop in on this one, and Wendy's done such a great job at the last meeting talking about our risk 268, how we're tracking that, what we're doing as mitigation steps, and we went through those risks. Let's go to the next slide. These are the items that sort of outline the various items that we're looking at. One of the big, from the project perspective, one of the risk mitigation steps for us has been really shifting Contra Costa from wave 1 to wave 2, providing them more time and actually making sure that we're focused on a smaller user base as we come into that first wave and sort of working through that item. We'll continue to work with Contra Costa data, the conversion guides, those types of things as if they are in wave 1, but some of those items are shifting out to wave 2 to give them more time to be able to work through that and us to be able to focus our attention and looking at preparations for UAT and working through that. So we're going to continue to monitor those risks and looking at that. Last month, let's go to the next slide.
Can I say something here, John?
Sure.
So I just wanted to say that from the Contra Costa perspective, since last month, you know, we have messaged this to our staff, to our county administrator, to our board of supervisors, and there's just a great deal of appreciation in Contra Costa for us being able to do this. I think especially our county administrator and our board were grateful for the good analysis that was done. And they just feel very fine about us moving forward. They feel comfortable about it. And among our staff, there was just this huge, you know, sense of relief and, again, gratitude. So thank you.
And I think the same feelings were with the project as well, that says, you know what, we do have some risks, and this is a true risk mitigation, and we need to surround YOLO and Placer with maybe additional on-site support during that cutover, and that's going to give us those facts so that we're looking at Contra Costa, we're looking at Santa Clara, we're looking at Tulare, and what are those gaps that we have to close down through the 4-month period so that we're really ready on those things, and so I think it's one of those win-wins. Last month, we also came and said, here are our contingency options, and I know I got a lot of sort of offline feedback on those things, and what I want to say is we're not in a contingency situation. We're in risk mitigation. Working with Contra Costa has been helpful in that risk mitigation, and if we do get into a contingency situation, we will be coming back to the impacted counties, to PSC, to JPA, and all of those things. Those were just an exercise that hopefully do not become reality. So I know there's concerns and problems with each one of those contingency options that we put forth, and we need to stay focused on mitigating the risk moving forward, making sure that we're dealing with facts on those. If we get there, we will be leveraging those to do probably what we wind up coming with, but we're not at that place yet. So I wanted to make sure that was clear as well. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, and Michael, I'll turn it back to you for questions.
Thanks, John, for the clarification on the contingency planning. That is an exercise we have to do as part of our due diligence, and want to remind everybody that it is a just-in-case set of scenarios that will still be explored further, you know, in the event we might need something like that. But we are not in no place now that says we have to do something. So thank you for explaining that, John. Any other questions, comments on what was presented just now by our board members and our state partners? Okay, hearing none. How about a public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. We might be able to keep on time.
And we have a substitute on that. Rachel Hernandez is going to be coming in for Peggy and providing the update. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I will be talking about UAT today. We are in the middle of UAT preparation activities. On this slide, just to highlight 3 key activities, we are in the middle of script development. We also did send a sample set of scripts to our awesome Calhoun counties to do some review and provide feedback. That way we wanted to understand, you know, do we have them all at the right level, because they are pretty detailed for our UAT participants. And application training is underway. Folks who are participating in the first group of UAT, which includes managed personnel, lobby management, CalWorks, CAPI, and childcare, and welfare to work, are in the middle of completing their LMS WVT trainings. That goes from now until June 10th. And those are our main activities that I'd like to highlight on this slide. Next slide, please. A couple of key topics we have, and right now I think we're now at 293, almost 300 UAT CalWin participants that will be participating in the UAT effort. We did identify a solution that would allow our UAT participants to access the environment. It's just another version of a VPN. We are proactively, and I think we're almost to resolution with most counties who were not able to support that. So an alternative approach has been defined. Our tech teams are working diligently with them. I do believe we have 1 or 2 counties that just need to work through their final alternative approach to move forward. We continue to work on our script development. And moving on to the May 2022 activities, just a couple of things that we have been able to complete. As mentioned, we are UAT testing with groups 1 and 2. We had our UAT group 1 application kickoff, again, just to get them started on the LMS front. We will be starting and have a GAGR script development kickoff to be able to focus on those CalWin GAGR scripts. And we are working directly with our CalWin counties to provide that level of support. The software installation has occurred. Again, the software installation piece was a proactive measure, an early measure to get our county set up with the tools to be able to access the environments, even though we technically don't start that until June. We also have a security UAT configuration setup that just took place, in which our UAT security administrators are actually setting up the UAT users in the environments to get their hands on and knowledge transfer on that approach. And my slide's a little down. And then the following couple of weeks, we will be bringing in our folks, our actual UAT testers, just to do some preliminary validation that they can just access the application. So by the time we start UAT execution, they're off and running. For the June activities, what we have going on is we will be closing out the application training with some facilitated webinar hands-on training for our group 1 folks. Our group 2 folks will start their LMS training, and subsequently, sometime in July, we'll have some hands-on training for themselves. And then we start our execution kickoff for group 1, and execution, actual touch and feel execution of scripts happens between June 27th and July 22nd for our group 1. So we're super excited. And a big shout out for our County UAT administrators who worked with us this week to get everything set up. We did training and set up in the respective environments, and they were super troopers. So thank you very much. And that is our UAT update.
Thank you, Rachel. That was very informative. I do encourage you to keep pressing on any of the technical issues that may be impeding folks from being able to get access, so that that's not any noise that comes up when they start to hit the ground on this. So thank you for staying in front of that. I want to open it up to any questions or comments from our directors or state partners on UAT. Okay, any public comment? Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. Moving right along, we'll start the next item.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Yang Beng Blaying, the Consortium's Implementation Manager. I'm going to be doing a high-level overview in the interest of time on the go-live governance structure that we will be implementing for the CalWIN migration. And this is us planning on how we're going to navigate to a 58-county system. And we'll be going through the, from a high level, the meetings that will be involved in order to get us to green light, to the green light meetings. And I do want to say that we leverage the structure that we implemented for the C4 counties for the CalWIN counties, and we made some tweaks to accommodate for the needs of the CalWIN counties. So again, we just want to go ahead and share this model with all of you today. If we can go to the next slide, please. So many of you are very familiar with this structure and this look and feel. This is all the dates and the timeframes and the meetings that we've identified for wave 1. But we will be leveraging this and using this for all of the other waves, for waves 2 to 6 as well. So at the top, you'll see the who's and what's. To the left there in the color areas, those are all the various swim lanes, the various models or the meetings that we'll be having readiness discussions at. The who and what are all the stakeholders involved and what we'll be bringing to those meetings, and the time frames in which we'll bringing those discussions to these meetings. So if we can go ahead and these the T minus X months are really important to us. That's how we're really marching towards, and how we know we're marching towards go live for each of the waves. So I just wanted to point that out there up on top of that screen there. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. For the next slide, county readiness checkpoint. So we are currently conducting all of these meetings now with the counties. Right now, the wave 1 counties have moved from a monthly meeting to a twice-a-month meeting. We're also having monthly global IPOC meetings, as well as the monthly CalWIN ISS stand-up meetings. And again, those are all taking place. We leverage many of our framework slides in terms of readiness to cover each of the readiness areas. Very much the same slides or the very similar slides that Catherine mentioned earlier, went through earlier. These are approximately 1-hour meetings each month or bi-weekly. And again, county readiness is discussed at all of these meetings. We leverage work plans as well as checklists in those specific county readiness checkpoints to do some of the inputs and have those discussions. Moving on to slide 5. For project readiness, these are internal project meetings, and we're having weekly and monthly reporting statuses. We envision that during the October timeframe, the week of the 17th, that we'll be coordinating a T-2 week checkpoint with CMS there to give, again, also readiness checkpoints there. The participants in these meetings will be section directors, RMs, and CMS staff, as well as, again, all of the various project leads on the project. The format will be weekly in the months, in the very close months going to go live, and then prior to that, we'll be on a monthly cadence. Materials there will be leveraging our readiness packets and dashboards that Catherine also mentioned a little bit earlier to ensure that the project is ready and that we're tracking to and making progress on all those project milestones and tasks. So I won't drain these slides, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Abby to finish up the rest of the slides.
Thanks, Yang. I'm going to go fast through this because of time. So this slide really relates to the PSC and JPA checkpoints that will be conducted where readiness status is shared with stakeholders. And we've identified the dates where we're going to be sharing the readiness updates. Today, we're bringing you the governance model, and then we're finalizing the dashboard by the end of this month, which is still on track as planned, and we will start sharing out the dashboard after it's finalized. So next slide, please. Okay, we will also share readiness status with OPAC and WCDS members. Here are the dates where we'll share the readiness updates. And again, we're bringing the governance model to these stakeholders this month, and then we're finalizing the dashboard by the end of the month, and we'll share that out. Next slide, please. Okay, so for county and state stakeholder checkpoints, these are county director checkpoints where the regional managers will inform county directors of status and timeline, escalate any issues and risks, and obtain agreement on going live readiness status starting at T-2 months. We have the dates and the timeframes identified here in this slide. And there's also a director's county prep checkpoint in mid-September and a final T-3 county director checkpoint. Next slide, please. So we'll also conduct stakeholder checkpoints starting at T-2. We'll be leveraging the state monthly IT status report meeting on August 10th, the state prep checkpoint at T-1 and T-3 weeks. And there are also separate state checkpoints with state partners such as DHCS, CDSS, and CWTA. Next slide. We will also conduct pre-Greenlight meetings like we did for the C4 migration with county leadership, state partners, and CalSAWS staff. And these start at T-1. These pre-Greenlight meetings are internal and serve as a dry run for the actual sessions. Next slide, please. And then we'll have the Greenlight meetings actually starting at T-1, the dates are identified on this slide. So that was the really quick update on the governance model. And just wanted to pass it over back to Michael Sylvester if there are any questions.
Real quick though, Michael, if I could just add a little bit more context. If we could go back to the next slide, we will be, for Greenlight, we will be leveraging the current regional governance structure to vote on Greenlight. And so each of the 6 regions will be voting at every Greenlight for the 6 waves. So the counties or the regions that have Calvin counties going live, those regions will be voting on readiness, yes or no. And then the other regions that don't have counties going live will be voting acknowledgement of those counties coming onto CalSAWS. So I wanted to make that distinction there for the regional governance voting structure.
Thank you, Yang.
And back to you, Michael.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Abby Yang. I do have something I just wanted to bring up, and that is that I think when I look through all the different governance components, the county stakeholders where the directors are involved is a really critical one, especially with the earlier discussions we had about what the directors need to do on the ground in their particular counties. And want to make sure that that actually starts soon enough in the process so that they can actually, recognize if they have an issue and do something about it. And it looks like it only went in at like T-2 or 3. So I just want to take that back and see if you guys can engage with John and the directors to make sure that the CalWIN directors have the window of updates and things that they can make decisions on the ground that could actually impact our success.
Michael, I think that's a good point. One of the things that we talked about earlier that isn't reflected here is that we are going to be doing site visits to each one of those counties a few months in advance to make sure there's the engagement and the open dialogue, and that the regional managers are always available to the directors, as am I, as we do that. But like next week, we're going out to Yolo. End of the month, we're going to Placer County to have some dialogue, and we're going to continue to have those items. So I think that's a good point. We will make sure that we have those items, and if necessary, we can reflect them on the governance as well to set those expectations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The directors are going to be key.
I have a question here. I really appreciate that clarification on the sort of regional governance and that it's a region's decision to go live or not. So we did a dry run with that when we were looking at, did we want to change the dates? Remember, a few weeks back? And so in Solano County, what my staff came back to me and said was, well, we didn't get the date we wanted, and it was majority, which was fine, that wasn't a big deal. But I'm wondering about going live, like what if one county just really is not ready? What's the contingency plan there?
We'll just press in and have some discussion, and then the contingency is it doesn't have to be a consensus decision. And, we'll come into that. Of course, we don't want to be there where we don't have everybody stacking hands and saying it's time to go live. If somebody has a concern, we need to press in, we need to figure out what it is, and fill the fear with facts. Whatever way we're going on that. So that's why we'll do that. We want the regions to come together. We want all the regions to come together to be able to do that, and then have a region by region vote. Some of those items are, happening within the regions. Then we come in and have the regional managers really convey that. If there's something that's stopping us because of those facts that we can't overcome, then we'll make sure that it's transparent in PSC and JPA as we're coming up. And there might be a need for escalations and things like that. But hopefully the facts show that we're ready to go live, and that any outstanding risk, because they all come with risk, that we're ready to sort of rally behind them and see where that is. And again, that's why having a smaller wave 1 pilot, any of those gaps, other than scaling gaps, and I think we're doing a great job on scaling the system and prepping the data, that we'll do that through additional support, specifically for Placer and YOLO, to be able to see what that experience is, and then do a retrospective on that to make sure that we're ready for wave 2 and be transparent on that.
Was it the same with the C4 counties? It was a global decision?
It was. We went through that as a global decision. Every single one of the regions, the regional managers talked specifically with each one of their directors. All 39 directors weighed into it, and their vote was through their regional managers, and there was consensus on that. And I truly think, even though there was some bumps in the road, some challenges that we had, that it was the right decision. It's been very successful, but now it's sort of cleaning up some of those items that we talked about earlier in the meeting and those types of things. So hopefully it's as clear of a decision as that. It was a positive process going live, and everybody stacked hands and said, we're ready to go, and it was an exciting moment, and benefits continued to roll out, and people were productive on the system, and we're still, you know, a couple of tough spots that we're looking at, like reports and stuff like that, but there was consensus. It was clear consensus.
Yeah, and that was a good dialogue we just had right there, because it is a representative model, but it is precisely why I brought up what I did, is that we want to know early on, and the directors early on, how they're faring, so that they're not feeling like they're not ready when it comes to a regional vote. So we want to make sure that that director engagement stakeholder happens, you know, sooner rather than later in the process. So that's all I wanted to mention on when I looked at your timelines, that might be too tight, and want to engage the directors sooner.
You're on mute, Michael.
I muted myself. Okay, any comments or questions additionally from our directors or our state partners on that particular presentation? Very important. Okay, hearing none, then any public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on and hopefully wrap up the last couple items here.
Hi, everybody. This is Wendy with QA. I will give a very, very quick overview of the conference coming up. So we're still looking at doing a 2-day conference, with the first day being the business meeting. We are still trying to find the date, settle on the date and time, because we have to have quorum. So Jennifer Smith is working with everyone to find that specific date and time for that. Again, for the business meeting, it will be to hold elections, conduct board business, hear some guest speakers, and have the procurement updates. And the Brown Act rules will apply for that. Jen, do you have an update?
A quick update, Wendy, on that is that probably day one, the conference will take place before the business meeting, because I think as we were looking at that June 22nd date and things like that, many counties are still in budget process, budget hearings. So it'll probably be that very last week that we'll do that. So our conference will take place first. The business meeting will take place second, most likely.
Right. Thank you, John. Our day 2 of our conference will be, maybe it's reversed, but our CalSAWS conference will be on June 23rd. We will start at 9 a.m. and go to 4:30 p.m. And we'll have a general session for some major topics, and then we'll have some morning and afternoon breakout sessions. Again, it will be an open forum for all attendees, so Brown Act rules will not be applied here. We will be able to host up to 1,000 participants, and very key, registration opens next week on May 18th. So look for materials coming out and information about registration. Next slide, please. This is a reminder, and I won't go through this one since we're running out short of time, but this is the agenda for the business meeting. And then the next slide, please. This is our conference, our proposed agenda for the conference. And there may be some title changes here or there, just to make sure that it's a little more interesting titles to describe what's really going to be held in those breakout sessions. But generally, we'll be talking about the implementation roadmap, having breakout sessions on those really key topics of imaging reports, UAT, et cetera, process OCM, implementation support, and benefits Cal. We're looking to have a speaker, as well as get some updates on our idea and cultural transformation, and then do a conference closeout. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Michael. Thank you.
Just to get a clarification on that, so it's a 2-day, and the first day would start on the 23rd or the 22nd?
I said that's what John was saying. I think the first day, we were thinking originally it was going to be on the 22nd. So, and then we would have the conference on the 23rd, but now
Should be a Wednesday, Thursday.
Wednesday, Thursday, but I think now it's probably going to be the following week for the business meeting. So we're trying to land on that date.
So they won't necessarily be conjoined.
Correct.
Oh, I see.
Correct.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, any,
okay,
go ahead.
The breakout sessions will be 90-minute long. We're going to be making sure that from the feedback we've gotten, it's county staff talking to county staff about best practices and those types of things. So we'll be gathering some panels along with project staff to sort of frame the item and facilitate those sessions. It'll be repeated morning to evening, so people can choose one in the morning and a different one in the afternoon.
Okay, great. Any comments, questions from our board members on this annual general membership meeting? No? Any public comment? Okay, great. on to our last item. Thank you, Wendy. Thanks, John.
Kayleen or Brian, anything on IV and V, a quick update?
Everything is noted on the slide. I won't keep everybody beyond the time of 3:30. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kayleen.
No problem.
Great. Thank you, Kayleen. We do have the materials, so everybody take a look at that. This is 12:30. Want to restore the rest of your day to everyone. Our next meeting is our big June meeting, and we'll get clarification out on the dates and how that's going to be split up shortly. But thanks everyone for your Friday time, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye, Michael. Bye, Michael.